All right. Good evening, everyone. It's 6:20. We are reconvening the 6:19. We're reconvening the Brattleboro Selectboard meeting. We entered into executive session at 5:15 and taking no action. I actually forgot to ask then, so I will now ask. John, was this meeting properly warned?
Yes, it was properly warned.
Great, thank you very much. All right, so we're gonna move on to agenda item 2, which is approving the minutes of May 16th, 2023. I would take a motion.
I will motion that we accept those minutes.
So Peter has made a motion to approve the minutes of May 16th, 2023. Board, is there any discussion? I actually have some discussion. I was reviewing the minutes, and it looks like there is an error in the, I'm trying to find them.
Page 7.
Page 7 of the minutes, thank you. The motions moving into executive session, specifically the second motion, there's an error on line 28 as to who was invited into the executive session.
What's the change?
It needs to change to striking the incoming select board members. I believe it's basically the language from a couple of executive sessions ago, and it should be, I believe, the town manager, the assistant town manager, and then the finance director and the HR director. I believe that's the case,
Yeah.
but I would just want the minutes to be, the record to be checked to ensure that it's accurate.
Are you moving that the minutes be amended?
Yeah, it would basically be a friendly amendment to the motion, so. Peter, is that agreeable?
That is agreeable.
Okay. It's my understanding, and I think I probably looked at John or Patrick, that on a non-substantive change to the minutes like that, we can approve them, given that those changes will be made. If I'm incorrect, then we can have the minutes changed and then vote on them again next meeting. It doesn't really matter to me.
Yeah, I think
That's
you can just
really unnecessarily formal. You could approve them with that modification.
Okay,
just
excellent.
approve.
Is there any other discussion on the May 16th minutes, board?
No.
Okay, so in that case, all those in favor of approving the May 16th minutes with the friendly amendment to modify the language for the second motion, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That's going to carry 5-0. Thank you very much. Okay, so moving on to agenda item 3, which is chair remarks. Just one remark this evening. We had our first ever Brattleboro Select Board retreat at the Winston Prouty campus on Saturday, and it was really successful. We had a couple members of the public there. It's recorded on BC TV. We're also going to be speaking about it at agenda in the future, maybe on the 20th or maybe in July. Sue Fillion, our planning director, sort of took over the gavel and ran the meeting so that each of the board members could sort of be able to speak and contribute. And I'm incredibly grateful to her work in really facilitating an excellent meeting. We had a really good discussion, and I'm excited to bring sort of a discussion about sort of a summary of that to the public at a select board meeting in the future. So thanks to Winston Prouty, and thank you to town staff, and for specifically all of the department heads for being there on a Saturday morning, because I was happy to be there, but I know that asking people to come in on the weekend is a big ask. So much appreciated, and with that, I will hand it over to John for manager's comments.
Thanks, Ian. A few comments tonight. I wanted to update you all on the emergency housing, the end of the GA program with the state. And so it looks like the June 1st wave seems fairly light. That's the general impression that I've been getting from people around town. This could be due to the good work that the state and their partners have been doing on helping people with transition plans, and that some of the motels seem to be allowing people to stay on a bit. The crisis response team has been meeting regularly and submitted a request for state assistance to set up an emergency shelter in July. Town also submitted a request in case the shelter does not get approved, and that request was to allow state lands to be used for dispersed camping. Town staff have been working on zoning guidance for tenting and other emergency shelters for people's private property in case they're needed later this summer. The Vermont Department of Health informed town staff last week that the work of our Safety and Wellness Committee has paid off, with the town of Brattleboro being selected to receive a 2023 Governor's Excellence Award in worksite wellness at the gold level. This is a great recognition of all the work that this committee and the HR staff have been doing to promote employee health and wellness in the workplace, which is also hopefully saving us on healthcare costs. For the Juneteenth celebration, the IDEA Committee determined that they did not have enough time to plan an adequate celebration this year at the Common, but are already working on 2024. This year, the town is inviting Black artists to display and sell their artwork in the Municipal Center on select dates this month. And for details, people should contact HR Director Sally Cruz-Nix. Finally, a shout out to Carol Lalott for her 33rd anniversary as Rec and Parks Director. She has the most years of service as any department head in the town, and we hope for many more. She would probably want me to remind everyone that Rec and Parks is gearing up for summer programs and camps, and parents can register right online at brattleboro.org or in person at 207 Main Street. That's all.
Great, John, thank you so much. We're going to, just one comment, John. You'll continue to update us on the situation with the end of the motel program each board meeting as we move forward, considering the July 1st deadline.
Yep.
Great.
Yeah, particularly if there's anything to report.
Yes, excellent. Thank you. Okay, so moving on to agenda item 5, which is select board comments and committee reports. My fellow board members. See none from Liz? Franz?
Thank you, Ian. May surprise some people to hear that I actually had a request from a member of the public to report on how my office hours are going. Took me by surprise. But anyway, I thought I'd accommodate that request with just a few very brief remarks. I've had some really interesting discussions with a number of people. What hasn't happened is kind of people just popping in and saying, well, here's what I think, and, giving you a short synopsis of a point of view. And what has been happening is that people have come in and stayed for an hour and a half, and we've had some really excellent in-depth discussions. Not that many people, because, when you're talking to somebody for an hour and a half, it takes up the available
90 minutes.
time. But,
Takes up about 90 minutes, give or take.
get my calculator. So, yeah, thank you for those
You're welcome. Yeah.
You're welcome.
worthy additions.
Being-
Anyway, so it's been going well. It's been a little different from what I had expected, but it's been great. Now, I had originally reserved the library space at 4:30 on Wednesdays for a period of 6 weeks, and that is up, so I don't have any more library time reserved. I am going to continue, at least for this week, to be available Friday morning at The Works on Main Street from 8 to 10. So if anybody wants to come in and either have a brief discussion or a long discussion at that time, I'll be happy to see you. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much, Franz. Peter, or Daniel, you good? Good. Good. Okay, so we'll move back on to public participation, agenda item 6. So this is an opportunity for members of the public to speak on an item that is not on the agenda or to request an item be pulled from the consent agenda. So I see Dick with his hand up and the only hand up, so come on down.
Thank you, Dick DeGray, whatever district I used to be from. I think it's still 2. I want to compliment somebody you just mentioned, but Paul and Dan, who are behind me with the rec department, and Carol Lalott and Paul Ethier, who are tremendous helps to me in the things that I do around the community. I can't do some of the things that I do without their help and without the rec department and Paul and his staff. And so I always want you guys to keep that in mind, that they're a big part of what's happening around town, and that cleanliness effort, that initiative that was put forward is paying dividends. I think our downtown is starting to look a whole lot better. The second thing is I have a question for you, John, with the homeless situation. Has there been any discussion with the works, and maybe it is, and I don't know the answer, that's why I'm asking the question, is that the facility is open during the day for people to at least access showers. I don't think that there's any overnights there, and probably won't be for a little while, but is the facility open so people can access that for hygiene issues that they're probably not getting on the street?
Great. Thank you, Dick. John, if you are willing to.
Yeah, we did try that with the Groundworks pause, and it was of mixed success, allowing that use there. We certainly would be open to considering it in the future if we can get somebody to help oversee that type of a use.
Great, thanks, John. Okay, I don't see any hands in the Zoom. And is there anyone in the room who wishes to speak during public participation? Going once, going twice. All right, so we're going to move on to the agenda item 7, which is the consent agenda. John, do you mind speaking briefly to the items that we have on the consent agenda this evening?
No, so we have 5 items on consent tonight. The dog warrant that, if approved, will allow the enforcement on dog owners of a $100 fine if they have not relicensed this year. 2 bid awards, one for crack sealing to protect our road pavement, and the other for the much-needed replacement of the Retreat pump station located down by the Retreat Meadows. An application for a grant to purchase 4 bulletproof vests, and a liquor license for the Heart Rose Club at 11 Green Street.
Excellent. Thank you very much, John. Board members, is there anyone who wishes to pull an item from the consent agenda?
No.
Seeing none, I would entertain a motion.
I
Bronze.
move that we accept the consent agenda as presented.
Franz has made a motion to accept the consent agenda as presented. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye. It's going to carry 5-0. Thank you very much. All right, we're going to move on to agenda item 8, new business A, which is the security services for town facilities. Ooh. So this is a discussion that began at the last select board meeting. Our town manager spoke briefly that this was going to be coming before the board this evening. We have a memorandum from Chief Hardy, and I'm going to pass it over to John for a brief introduction to the item.
And I really appreciated the conversation at the Select Board retreat on Saturday, and while we'll be coming back to confirm the board's priorities, one that the staff heard loud and clear was making the transportation center a good place, and especially a good place for parking, and we are already on it. And as you mentioned, I had talked about this at the last regular meeting during manager comments, that we were looking into the idea of security services to supplement the police presence, and also other improvements that we're making to the parking garage. And in fact, DPW has been working very hard to increase the feeling of safety there with things like putting the lighting system on at all times, including during daylight hours. They've also limited access to the elevator at night, which was becoming a significant safety issue. And they're putting a strong effort into daily cleaning, upkeep, and repairs. Also, I would add that Advanced Security Integration LLC is tentatively scheduled to be on site next week to begin some of the cable and prep work for the camera system that's being installed there. But this item tonight is to continue to bring increased attention and care to the transportation center. The police department has found 2 firms interested in providing security services downtown, and Assistant Chief Evans is here to elaborate further and answer questions from the board.
Excellent, and I apologize, Assistant Chief, for not inviting you up right at the beginning, so
No,
welcome.
no, thank you.
Do you have any more of a presentation that you want to speak to on this item, or just take questions and comments from the board and the public?
I could do either or, I guess, if you'd like, I can.
I think a little bit more info, and then we can take a motion and have discussion would be really helpful.
Sure. So, we've talked to, obviously, we've talked about the parking garage extensively. But we also talked to the town about other areas of concern, for the municipality. And so the two things we're looking at, one is the parking garage, obviously, and putting some, security there. Looking at, we looked at the most likely hours where we have the highest call volume, and that was generally the 3 to 11 in the evening. So we're looking at nightly from 3 to 11, looking to have security there. And then secondarily was the municipal center, the library, and the rec, and having a general security presence at those facilities. A little earlier, I think we were looking at a 2 to 10 for that area, and that would be, the parking garage would be people assigned to the parking garage. The other one would be roving between all those, not having someone assigned to each one. So that's the general overall view on that. I could break it down more if you'd like, or if there's specific questions, maybe it might be better off to handle it that way.
Yeah, why don't we take a motion board, and then let's have conversation, discussion, questions. So,
I'll make a motion.
yeah, thank you.
I move to authorize town staff to engage private security from Securitas for $39 per hour for a total of $2,184 a week for the Brattleboro Transportation Center, and Hill Street Security for $35 an hour for a total of $1,960 per week for the Brooks Memorial Library, the Recreation Center, and the Municipal Center.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Liz, for making the motion. So, board, discussion, questions, comments for municipal staff?
I'll start.
Yeah, please.
I want to register my support and applaud this innovative approach to creating order out of the chaos that our transportation center has become. It is a primary goal of this community and of our select board retreat to create a safe and land use, which is a parking garage. The police have been listening to the community, and there are crimes occurring. And the interesting thing is that the manner in which the crimes occur do not allow for arrests because they need to be witnessed. And I believe that this tool of non-armed security patrols is something that would create a safer community because it provides witness and evidence for arrests to be made. And I feel that this is an interim measure until the full police force is created. And I think this is a pilot project that's worthy of our consideration. We already have new lights. We already are getting cameras. And the last would be this action. So it's lights, cameras, action.
Well done.
I like to have this element in the police toolbox as a deterrent to crime and as creating evidence of crimes. I think we are at a critical juncture in our town, and I think we can do this at the very least to create improvement in the parking garage. I also note that these crimes that are alleged to be occurring at the transportation center include crimes against women and children. And these crimes require observation to be arrested, and that includes sexual crimes and drug sales. And we need the security to create the eyes and ears for the police. And that's all for now. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Liz. Other board members? Yeah, Peter.
So I'm also in favor of this. I think it's long overdue. I think this is a thing that has been talked about over and over again for years and years that I can recall. So I am happy that this is coming before us tonight so that I can raise my hand to the affirmative on this thing. We know, as Liz just mentioned, that there are a lot of crimes that you can put into a spreadsheet, and then there are a lot of crimes that you cannot put into a spreadsheet. And I think a majority of what's driving folks crazy are people who are coming in to shop in our downtowns, people who are looking for places to park, are the crimes that are not being put into a spreadsheet. And they do, unfortunately, include the children of our community, sex trafficking, human trafficking. These are all things that Chief Hardy has cited before, and it's just time to stop. And I think just having a presence will eliminate that, at least from our downtown area, and I think that is, I'm really glad that this is coming before us tonight.
Great. Oh,
Yep.
yep. Thank you very much, Peter. Board members? Franz?
Well, I have to say, I'm generally supportive of the program as well. But I do have, initially I was kind of skeptical though. And in particular, having, sort of outsiders come in and perform police-like activities in our town does raise some questions in my mind. I think getting the right firm, having knowing that there's a good track record of these companies, et cetera, goes some way in answering my questions. But I guess what I'm, if I can interrogate the Assistant Chief Evans about what he knows on this, or perhaps, John, you'd want to chime in. But how will the actual performance of the these two different agencies that you're proposing that we hire on, how will they be supervised and monitored and assessed in real time so that we know if the things are really going well?
Sure. Two-part question, I think, and I want to make sure I answer both. So let me know if I miss something.
Okay.
So the first part is we spent time speaking with both these companies. We actually spoke with more than just the two of them, but these are the two that we decided to move forward with. The reason that the chief and I actually had a pretty lively conversation before we even went to this, because we talked about sworn versus non-sworn. So hiring an outside agency like the Sheriff's Department to come in and provide versus hiring people that aren't police officers to come in. And we both fell on the side of hiring people that aren't police officers to come in. Mostly because we feel like that way the town has the most control over the situation, most control over the people that we put down there, that we can have the best benefit of knowing what they're going to do and how they're going to do it. If we hire another law enforcement agency, they have authority to do all law enforcement activities, and we don't necessarily have as much control over that, and we don't have control over like them supporting our particular mission for the town of Brattleboro, which I think everyone has learned that like every community is different, and this community has very specific mission and tasks that they're asking of their police department. So we took that into account before we decided that this would be the best plan. And also that we'll be having both the companies supervised by the police department. So we'll have control over what they're doing, where they're at, and how they're doing it, and be able to judge that. We don't want them doing law enforcement activities. We want them providing a solid presence, continuous presence, and reporting back to us things that need to be handled by law enforcement so that we can take the town's mission and the department's mission into account when those enforcement actions might have to be taken.
Okay, thank you. I got a couple more. Now, the hours of coverage is another question that I've been thinking about. So I gather there's some knowledge of what time problems tend to arise at the transportation center. But not so much, is this the right amount of coverage, or is it not enough or too much, et cetera? But how will we keep track of whether the problems are being adequately addressed during the amount of coverage by these security personnel? I'm just sort of thinking that maybe the problems will shift to a different time frame or something like that, and something that we probably need to keep on top of.
That definitely could happen. If that does happen, then honestly, that'll be a sign that they're working. It's working because if we have a shift, the biggest the biggest thing we're looking at is a consistent presence in the time frame where we see the most problems occurring, and not just actual things occurring, but people's perception of what's happening, like how they feel when they go into the garage. That's probably more important than what actually happens to some extent, because that perception is what causes a lot of problems for us. That causes people not want to come to town. That causes people to not want to shop downtown, not want to use the parking garage. And we need to take some action to change that perception, in any way we can impact that. And the town's doing many things to impact that with the lighting, and the cleanliness and other areas. And this is just another area where we're looking at having a positive presence there so that we can get we have the presence of people down there to just be there and show that they're there and make it known, because like something we tell landlords all the time is the most important thing is to acknowledge what's happening. Like when you have tenants that are causing a problem, like acknowledging it to them, like, hey, this is causing a problem, because often just acknowledging that the problem is there can fix a problem. So it's the same with the garage. Like if we have people down there constantly acknowledging that this is a problem and addressing it, and if the presence isn't addressing it and there's law enforcement action that needs to be taken, then they call us, and we come down and choose how that action is going to take place, while taking into account what the town is looking for and what the mission of the department is. But that seems to be, right now, the best plan for us to move forward.
So, what I'm really getting at is how, I agree with you that if the time frame of when bad things are happening shifts, that means probably that the program is a success during the hours when it's in effect. But, our goal is not to have safe times and unsafe times. Our goal is to have a safe facility. So I'm just concerned that we monitor that and have a way of knowing whether this thing is really producing what we want. Which is not to criticize it, but just to say we need to keep our eyes open. There's a related problem that I think may be a little too complex to get into, but I want to at least mention it, which is the whack-a-mole aspect of a lot of the types of things we're looking at, especially drug deals and stuff like that. If we're very successful in eliminating it from the transportation center, that doesn't mean it won't pop up somewhere else in town. So it's, as I said, I'm in favor of this type of approach, but I don't necessarily look at it as a cure-all, and we could end up needing to then look at other places where the activity has moved to. So just something that I'm thinking about. That's it.
Great. Thank you very much, Franz. Daniel?
Sure. Assistant Chief, welcome. Thanks for coming. And I want to express some skepticism and mixed feelings about this proposal, but I also want to affirm that like making the transportation center a good place to park your vehicle is like a perfectly reasonable goal. And it's fairly kind of well understood that there are large numbers of people in this community who don't currently feel that way about it, right? So I would like to see the transportation center be a good place to park your vehicle, because that's what it's for. When I read the memo, my eyebrows raised at the fee. So just to be clear, if we were to engage with this service for 12 months, we're talking about $113,000, which, in my experience on this board, that kind of money doesn't get spent as quickly as it's being spent, as it's being proposed to be spent, with just one memo that came out of the blue. So I'm surprised by that. So I'd like to know from the town manager where that money's coming from. And maybe I can ask a couple of questions and then leave it to you. And that's not to say that that may would not end up being a reasonable investment, depending on the impact. But I think the skepticism that I have personally, and that I've seen, from community members as well, is that, as Assistant Chief Evans, you mentioned, this is really about addressing perception. And there is a perception right now that the transportation center is a bad place to go and take your vehicle to park it, right? And that's a fact that people feel that way. Whether expending this amount of money will actually alter that remains to be seen. It sounds like there's at least enough support on this board to give it a try. What I really want to make sure that we do is, given that we're saying that this is a pilot program, that we have a reasonable plan to evaluate whether it's been successful or not. And so I want to propose a couple of ways to do that. One would be a decrease in calls to the department about activity in the transportation center and its surrounding streets. So we have data already that says how many calls occur in that area. Peter was alluding to a spreadsheet earlier. I made a spreadsheet with a summary of some of that call data. It's from the department's monthly log. And like all incident data requires somebody to pick up the phone, call it in, and then it to be responded to. So there are always going to be these like unknown incidents that don't get reported, that we're kind of aware of in the community because we're in the community. But I do think that we have to make decisions that are informed by the data that we do have. So we might know that this was successful if we saw a reduction in calls for specifically the transportation center, but maybe also the surrounding streets. And then secondly, if this is an attempt to make the transportation center a good place to park your vehicle, then we should see a change in use in that site. So I would imagine, hopefully, an increase in revenue from that location specifically. And as we get to the parking fund later on in this agenda, I'd already asked Patrick, who's the parking guru, to let me know that it's possible to get more granular parking revenue data by location. And Patrick, I believe that is correct. It is possible. Okay. And so we don't have it for today, but like we should have like a baseline number, right? And the parking fund has gone through a transition over the last several years with COVID. It took a massive hit. I think the parking meter system changed before COVID though, so we should have like maybe one pre-COVID year.
Fiscal 19, I believe.
Yeah. So if we could see that spending $113,000 on private security for this facility resulted in a reduction in calls to the department and an increase in revenue for that location specifically, then I will say my skepticism turned out to be unwarranted. If we don't see that, then I would like us to reconsider whether this is an appropriate thing to continue, and that we might say that the pilot had mixed results at best. I think that what we're going to see is probably some improvement, right? Like there are activities that occur within the parking garage right now that are unacceptable, right? And then there are also activities that are probably at best classified as like loitering. You know, so I wonder, like, will the security guard, how would they handle somebody just sitting outside the structure? Would they be asked to move along? And if so, you know, that's going to just push this person that some people are perceiving as a problem to another part of town, and then they might pick up the phone and say, I don't like what's happening here, right? You know, so it doesn't address any of the need that being in that location was meeting. And I would say that the security guard, I hope, it sounds like, you know, you already talked about this with the chief, is going to adopt an approach that befits the kind of mentality of the kind of work that you guys have been doing in the community. And so I think that we should have curiosity about the needs of people that are in that location and not simply just say, move along, we're not interested, right? Some of it is maybe some shade. Some of it is community. Some of it is access to a bathroom. Those are all things that this board can address, and I hope we will address in other parts of our work. I remember at town meeting, we were kind of talking about like pitting one expenditure against some other, and I don't think that that's the right way to go about this work. We could choose to give this pilot a try, spend this money in this way, and also invest in things like public bathrooms, invest in parks and other kind of areas that are pleasant to be in, right? This town should be a place where people, regardless of how much money's in their bank account, can find some place to sit and have a nice time. Okay, so there were like a million questions from community members. I'm hoping that a lot of them are in this meeting and we'll ask them. They were good questions and reasonable questions. I saw a discourse online that was pretty civil. You know, like people are frustrated, right? And rightly so. And people also have skepticism, and rightly so. You know, and it's our responsibility to make decisions that are responsible, right? That use taxpayers' money wisely.
So John, do you want to have some response? You had a response?
Yeah, I did to the specific questions that Daniel, that you were asking. Thank you for that. Appreciate that. We were not proposing to do this for a year or any really set amount of time yet, so it's a little bit much to pull in numbers like you were talking about, but the reason being that we see that this is a pilot. We want to try it out. It was a response to the carjacking, and like, for goodness sakes, we've got a lot going on down there. Let's start to draw a line. And so I feel like we will be flexible in adjusting schedules. We have these cameras going in very soon, which we've been patiently waiting for, which could change the situation for us and maybe allow us to adjust this approach. We also have 5 officers going to the, 5 candidates going to the academy in August, and that is going to also change the picture for how we manage areas like this. So what I would propose to the board is that that the staff come back in like 8 to 10 weeks, something like that, and we reevaluate at that point. And you know, that would be from now until then something on the order of $30,000 to $40,000 if we spend it all on as has been suggested, and I believe we would find a way to pay for that from the general fund. So that's our staff's response to your question around the spending and the length of time and the evaluation.
Do you think that the ways that I proposed evaluating it are reasonable or sound?
Actually, not entirely, and I think they are good things to look at, but I think that this is a complex environment here, and that we may not see over 8 weeks the type of change that you're suggesting. But you were thinking more in the terms of
Yeah,
a year,
I wasn't
and-
thinking
Yeah,
8 weeks
so-
we'd see that kind of turnaround,
Yeah.
maybe 6 months.
So, yeah, I think those are both good points to be looking at, but it is still a very complex ecosystem there, so.
Great. Good to go, Daniel. you had your.
Yeah, so, yeah, I just wanted to kind of address a few points that I heard, and I was going to ask the Assistant Chief the question, do you see this freeing up resources between 3 and 11 for the police department? Is it that there'll be less focus on having to go down there and patrol that area because we have people in place?
Yes.
Yes, okay, simple question. The other thing, the other piece of this is, that I wanted to address is this time frame on a pilot. And Daniel, you've alluded to it, knowing that what I've often said is that parking garage is defining our community as a whole, and that's not good. So taking a step in this direction is good. It will take a while for that narrative to change, even though the police department, I believe, will see an immediate change with just having a presence that are there that can respond quickly to call in police action if something is happening. So, you know, I think we're going to need to, we're going to need to pay attention to that narrative and make sure that we are doing what we can do to change that narrative, to let everybody know that this parking garage is now under surveillance. It has new cameras. It's got better lighting. We've had to shut down the toilets at night for a myriad of reasons that we don't need to go into right now, but one can imagine. I don't ever want to get into a situation where we're putting a dollar figure on the heads of the people that come in and out of there. If it costs $120,000, and that means we have increased revenue from the parking garage, people are feeling safe and they are coming back downtown, I think it's money well spent.
Liz?
I just wanted to talk about 2 points. First, I don't think that this is a perception issue. I think that the reality is that there's crimes occurring down there, and it's not merely some sort of perception. The other thing I wanted to talk about was data. You know, we have data on how many police calls, and we have data on how many fire calls. They're very different things. You know, if someone calls the fire department and they come, they address what it is, and it's clear cut. If there's need for police, they may come and not be able to make an arrest because they don't have evidence. So that's the beauty of this program, is that I think, unlike what Peter just brought up, I think that there may be more police activity with these security guards, because the security guards, being the eyes and ears of the department, will call the police department and actually be able to do something more frequently. And so also in terms of Daniel's benchmarks, it's not necessarily a reduction in police calls. It may be an acceleration as we witness crimes occurring and we have evidence to make that change. So it's a complicated system, as John brought up, but I think we will be having more tools to arrest people and halt the behavior that is real and not just a perception.
Great, thank you, Liz. Daniel?
Yeah, I just want to add on to that. I mean, I totally agree. I would expect that if we had a security guard at that location, there's actually going to be an increase in calls to the department for that location, you know. And I would also expect that over time, right, you would see probably an initial spike, and then if it's effective, you should see something kind of tailing off, right, because behavior would have changed there. And I just want to add that I think people are calling the police for a number of reasons, and not just to kind of report a crime in progress, or, you know, like, you guys are not just showing up to arrest somebody, right? There's a number of reasons why you might be called to any particular location.
Was that a question or just a?
I hope it's kind of just obvious, but.
Okay.
You know.
Okay, so board, good discussion. I have just a couple, so most of my questions were answered mostly with Franz. I mean, I think kind of the obvious one is, can I say AC? Evans, or do you?
Yes, sir.
Yes. AC Evans, does the police department think that this is going to help with the situation that's at the transportation center?
I mean, we wouldn't come to you with it if we didn't think it was gonna help.
Yeah. So I really appreciate the creative thinking on this. Have felt very frustrated about what to do about this area of town, and we hear from people in the public about it all the time, and I'm really conscious of that. And so I think that this is a really good initiative to see as a pilot program. I'm glad to hear that we have oversight, which is going to come directly from our police department, who we trust. And what I'd like to ask is, beyond the 8 to 10 week check-in on sort of how it's going, if with that oversight, anything comes up that like we need to talk about, that it comes to the select board before 8 to 10 weeks. So, you know, in that oversight, if there's, you know, anything that is, would be of note or important for the select board or the town to know, that we hear about it in the interim. Because that 8 to 10 weeks, a lot can happen, so.
Definitely.
Yeah, so, and especially because we're pulling in third parties that aren't the police department. I'm just cautious. So I just make that request. And I see 3 nods, so at least. And then, yeah, do we kind of see this as potentially after the 5 candidates go to the academy and we are onboarding more police officers, that this pilot program could kind of
Sunset.
Yeah, sunset as we add more police to our department? Is that kind of the idea behind this proposal? Or is it a different?
That's the plan right now, yes.
Okay.
And if I could just, one thing that Daniel mentioned that I thought was important was, one of the reasons that we wanted to go with these 2 companies is they both have connections in town.
Yeah.
With the base of people that they'll probably be interacting with, which we've vetted the other places that they work in town, and we've gotten positive reviews from both of those places. And we thought that that was really important because there's already a connection for them. It's not just bringing people in blind.
Yeah, one of these 2 security agencies does the courts, correct?
Yes.
And so I interact with them every day. So, and they're,
So it was important to us to just not bring in some company that doesn't have any connections here.
yeah.
I think that was an important point to make.
Yeah, I appreciate the
Thank
point.
you.
So board, other questions or comments before we turn it over to the public? Seeing none, so people like to speak. Oh, actually, I had one other question. And John, what would be the impact for just the 8 to 10 weeks on the budget?
In the neighborhood of 30 to 40,000.
Okay. Okay, I think that is, for a pilot program to see if this can improve a situation that really needs immediate attention, very reasonable. So I'll Dick, and then I'll look to see that.
My head wants to explode.
Yeah.
The hypocrisy that I've listened to here this evening. I read Mr. O'Connor's article in Vermont Digger, and didn't realize I was here so many times and so many other people through the past year asking for your help. And all of you turned your back on all of us. And if it wasn't for the incident that happened a couple of weeks ago where a knife was brandished, this would be a J.R. Ewing, Who Shot Bobby? It is appalling to me that the only reason that you are reacting to the cries from the public for over a year is because somebody pulled a knife on somebody. That is hypocrisy. And why? Because you have not done anything. We've asked you for help. We've asked you for cameras. There's no talk of cameras. I talked to the chief today. She says she made a tour with Patrick and other people to talk about cameras. Nothing here about that. Talking about putting a security person up at the municipal center, the library, and the rec department. I asked Mr. Evans before the meeting, how many calls have we had in these 3 facilities that would dictate having a full-time security person? And oh, by the way, what's their hours going to be? And I said, everything is happening downtown. Daniel referenced a call sheet. There's 70 calls on Main Street. And we've got a guy in the transportation center. When I don't disagree, it should have happened a long, long time ago. So we go, okay, we're doing it now. Give us a break, we're gonna do it now. But it should have happened a year ago, and maybe the lady wouldn't have been threatened with her life to get her car. No action is your action plan. And seeing this, I talked to the chief this morning, I talked to Mr. Evans before the meeting, and I said, what's the next step? Waiting 10 weeks for some sort of report to come back to you as to how this is working is a joke also. You should get a report within a month to say, what's happening? How are the calls? Is there a decrease? Give us a report. Why do I want to wait 10 weeks? You talk to people on the street, they'll tell you that transportation center is an absolute zoo. I'm going to be concerned for the person that's in there working for the security force. I don't know what type of communication. Is it going to be through cell phone? Is he going to have a direct line to dispatch to get somebody down there? I know he's not going to be armed, which I totally agree with. I hope he has mace to at least protect himself. But there's a lot of activity, and I can't believe that you said, we're going to protect this facility here in the library. And could you give me the hours of what that person's going to be? Is he going to be 3 to 11 too?
That one, we're looking at 2 to 10 right now.
2 to 10, when the places are closed for a couple hours. Maybe a better use, as I said to Mr. Evans, is say, okay, you have some concerns up here, take that person and have him walking around downtown. Not just these 3 facilities. That's laughable. It really is. And not one of you asked a question about it. That bothers me even more than what I'm saying. That should be a concern to you. The problems are coming from the merchants, the building owners, and we're going to protect the 3 municipal facilities. That's a joke. That's laughable. So I hope, now, I have a lot of trepidation about this. I actually think there should be a minimum of 2 people in the transportation center. So in case something happens, somebody can get up there to the other person in a rather quicker time than most likely the police department's going to be able to get down there to help that person out if something happens to them. And there's a high potential of that, given the number of people that are hanging around in there that I don't think any of us want to deal with. So you should think about that, and then think about the person that's supposed to be in these 3 facilities is saying, we want you to walk around downtown. And if you see anything, then you get a hold of dispatch. But to have somebody right here, that's like taking my money and setting it on fire because I'm not going to get anything for it. And yes, I know they smashed a window down there,
Dick,
and
I'll just
that's
ask
a
you to
one-off.
Wrap up your comment, please.
That's a one-off. So I would hope that you say, I think Dick's got a couple of good ideas, and to use this guy at least up here, and then put another person in the transportation center. This is about safety, not only for our people, but the people that are working.
Great. Thank you very much, Dick. Any hands on Zoom?
No, sir.
Okay, yep. I saw, all 3 hands went up at the
Does
same
not
time.
want me to talk. My name is John Raffensberger. I'm the owner of Hill Street Security, and I've talked and had a great conversation with the chief and assistant chief. I'd like to say, though, the one thing that what you're going to see, because we have experience in town doing this with several retailers, that as soon as you show a presence, you'll automatically see people scurry away. It's like, literally, it's like cockroaches when you turn the kitchen light on. They literally, like.
You just direct all
Oh,
your
sorry,
stuff
yeah,
forward.
so it's literally like cockroaches running away. If they know somebody's there watching, they don't like to be bothered. If I'm thinking what's happening is happening, they don't like that. If they can be reported right away, it's happened. I have one retailer who we've been working with for 2 years, hasn't had an incident, and before we got there, it was a constant threat of theft. So I think, and the other thing I talked about with Chief is our flexibility. I think with a security guard, it's the more we do, the better we are. And if they request us to do patrols out in the street or up and down a block, I think we'd be happy to do that. So we're very flexible. I'm right across the street in Keene, New Hampshire. I've owned this company for 20 years. A lot of the people that I'll have working here live in Brattleboro or in Vermont, and some from Keene. So I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make this a successful program, because I've seen it work before.
And sorry, your name, you went quickly.
I know. You'll never spell it. John Raffensperger.
Okay, and John, can businesses downtown also hire your services?
Yes, they can.
Great, thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
I think, yes, come on. And then Ivan, I saw your hand up after.
Hi, everybody. Michelle Simpson from the Boys and Girls Club. I just want to say thank you for taking this action. I think it will have an effect, a positive effect. And I happened to come across some research from the U.S. Department of Justice, crime prevention through environmental design and parking facilities. Really, scintillating reading, but the point of this is that putting security in there is just standard best practice. This is not some outlandish sort of proposal. This is something that is standard in other places, and it's a best practice in parking facilities, and it is really a crime deterrent. I really appreciate Elizabeth's comments about perception versus reality. And I want to share what community safety looks like. When a community is safe, everyone can go about their daily activities and access opportunities with comfort and without the fear, threat, or reality of violence harming them or their loved ones. So it isn't just a perception, it is a reality, and I think that that's quite important. One thing that I wanted to bring up, it's great that you're here, I really appreciate that as well. The Transportation Center affects Elliott and Flat Streets with both of their entrances there, and of course affects Main Street as well, tangentially, because it's a block away. It's where people are parking to go downtown. The town and the police department have done a nice job posting lots of signs down there right now about no drinking, no smoking, no, a lot of sign everywhere, sign down there about what not to do. It hasn't been enforced. I hope that the private security firms will be able to maintain healthy social norms in there as well, not just heightened criminal activity, but actually the small behaviors of public drinking, drug use, and even smoking cigarettes, which I know that seems so sort of what a low bar right now when we're talking about violent crimes against citizens and women and children in the Transportation Center. But the reason that it is so important for the small behaviors to be addressed is we are in the business at the Boys and Girls Club, and I think everybody in this room working on behalf of community, we are all in the prevention business, right? That's what we're all trying to do, is prevent, negative things from happening. And there's something called adverse childhood experiences, the ACEs, and I will leave this also with you all. This is from the CDC. Preventing adverse childhood experiences. The Attorney General also has a Defending Childhood initiative, which similarly is about preventing adverse childhood experiences. The common thread between these massive longitudinal studies is we need to embrace healthy social norms in public spaces. That is what prevents kids from smoking, doing drugs, prostituting themselves. You don't normalize those behaviors. So I really would ask that along with this, that those rules that are laws in the municipal building.
Michelle, I'll just ask you to wrap up your comment, please.
Oh, wrap it up?
Thank you.
Yeah, okay. So that, I just want to put that in the mix, and that hopefully that is part of this. And thank you very much. I really think that this is a wonderful move forward. We will feel it. We will feel the effects of this every day. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I think I saw Stacy on Zoom, and my like is to go back and forth. So if you be patient with me, I'm just gonna let them go first.
Good evening, Select Board and Assistant Chief Evans. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, and if you could just introduce yourself and tell us where you're from for the record.
Perfect. My name is Casey Viato. I'm a resident of Brattleboro. Thanks so much for holding this tonight and allowing us to have public comment. I have a couple of concerns that I would like to just enter into the record. My first major concern is that we have mentioned crimes against women and children in the downtown area. And I would really like to see data that shows what we are experiencing in the downtown area, as that is a massive concern, and one that a security officer would not be able to address on a long-term standard. And additionally to that, I'm hoping that we could talk more about the community safety review that was done and how those funds can be used to sort of create more resources for folks. I understand and I support having some security downtown and helping everyone feel safer. However, some of these issues sound like much longer and deeper issues that won't be solved without additional community resources. So I'm hoping that that's part of the conversation as well.
Oh, great. Thank you very much, Casey. I think I accidentally got
Stacy.
Stacy. Okay, I did get it correct the first time. Okay, and now very patiently, Ivan.
Hello, my name is Ivan Hennessy. I live on South Main Street. Last fall, I was here at a meeting where a police officer informed the select board that most of the incidents at the parking garage were not something that anyone would be arrested for. We're talking about ticketable offenses. And tonight, I'm hearing about human trafficking. So I think that the conversation has drifted. So after that meeting, I was hearing about, there are people urinating and defecating in the transportation center. There are syringes everywhere. I took it upon myself to go there. I park there occasionally, but don't pay much attention to it, so I decided to go there with the really minor equipment necessary to take care of syringes. Nitrile gloves, some hard plastic containers, a flashlight. My first trip through, I found some syringes. I went around the outside, found some syringes there. I've been, for the past 3 months, walking around town 3 or 4 times a month, finding hotspots where I know that there are syringes, requesting that people let me know where syringes are. This is, to my mind, this is important because it's part of the perception thing, which is that people see threats that aren't there. There are lots of threats that are there. A piece of orange plastic gets treated as a biohazard, but it's an easy thing to solve without spending tens of thousands of dollars. If you walk around downtown where there are Sharps collection containers, there are not syringes. Where there aren't Sharps collection containers, in certain spots there are syringes. Similarly, where there are accessible bathrooms, there are not people urinating and defecating in the parking garage and on the street and things like that. Those are the day-to-day experiences of people actually using the parking garage, and those are easily managed and handled without a security presence. The actual safety concerns are real and need to be addressed, but they are being conflated with the ickiness of seeing people that we don't like to see, smelling things we don't like to smell, and separating those two so that we can address the different aspects of it most effectively is going to serve the town better than assuming a security presence is going to fix everything. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yvonne, or I always get it wrong. Okay, thank you. And I've got one more hand on Zoom, and does anyone else want to speak in the room? Last chance, I see two. Okay, so we got 3 hands left. Barb?
Hi there, thanks y'all. Armies, District 3, I think. Yeah, so.
Does he know?
Boy, there's a lot to say. I was already concerned about this coming into this, and a lot of what I've heard here has made me even more concerned. I'll start with the one thing that is maybe less concerning, but just sort of notable. The first comment was about this in favor of this proposal was that it's innovative, which you can characterize this in lots of ways, including positive ways. I wouldn't, but innovative is certainly not something that seems accurate. Like this seems like something straight out of the Nixon administration. This is not innovative. This is something that's been tried for decades and decades and decades, and it's not working. And I'm not sure why we think it's going to work better in this scenario. Even in the limited capacity of actually trying to manage perceptions. Like I don't see that it's, that maybe goes a little bit forward into the future, into Giuliani administration, talking about broken windows. Like that's, that this seems to be where we're at, and it's really frustrating. And I feel like y'all, I understand that there's a lot of public outcry out there that you have to respond to, and you feel like you need to do something. And if you were a different select board in a different town, I could see how this would be maybe a reasonable response because you don't have a lot of options at hand. But you spent a significant amount of time and resources funding this community safety review process that gave you a lot of great suggestions, all of which seem to be thrown out the window. And it's incredibly frustrating to watch this play out. And the particular solution that's being talked about here, I heard it said that these 2 security firms were vetted. I'm not sure if they the process of this vetting process, they referred to members of the public as cockroaches in those scenarios, but you've heard it here, and that does not. This isn't a firm that feels like is going to very well represent the interests of and the values of the town. And I seriously hope that you'll reconsider this proposal.
Thank you very much. Okay, so I'm not sure. I think I saw your hand up, and I don't know your name, so apologize.
Hi, I'm Emma. I'm the person who was carjacked.
And
I just wanted to say thank you for the police support. Thank you for the community support, all of that. And when I first heard about this proposal, my concern was that it was kind of a knee-jerk reaction. And I just want to make sure that we understand that the transportation system, the parking garage and what's going on there is a symptom of the larger things. And we, you know, the things like providing shade and community outreach and all these other like great services I'm hearing about would make a much larger impact in dealing with the underlying concerns that like cause the transportation center to become what it's become. I've parked there for like 6 years now. I don't have another option. It's where I have to park, and so I am very appreciative of all of the alternative perspectives and other like creative solutions that are being discussed also. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Emma, and I appreciate you coming to speak tonight. I think it's an important perspective to hear. Kate, and then I see one hand on Zoom, and then we're done.
Hi, I'm Kate O'Connor from Brattleboro, and I haven't had a chance to talk to Dick about this, so he's going to hear this for the first time. I'm actually here because I'm on the board of Brooks Memorial Library, and I just want to put some context into why I think it's a good idea that you have somebody go through the library. You know, we have a wonderful library staff, and they are faced, I think, probably almost every day with some kind of incident. And it's not what they're there to do, but they're put in positions that I think a lot of us do not want to be put in. It was about a month ago, I was down there for a meeting, and all of a sudden our fearless library director is shooting out the door, running down the sidewalk, trying to get somebody who had earlier that day been in there and stole somebody else's computer. And I thought, our library director should not be shooting out the door, running up the sidewalk to accost somebody who stole something. So I think I wanted to come down here and say that on behalf of the library. I think it's really important that there's some kind of presence there, because I think people in the community, if they knew what was happening there, they'd be quite shocked by it. So thank you.
Were you watching on Zoom and came down here?
I did. I ran through my backyard. That's why
Kate O'Connor, God bless you. Okay, well, and thank you very much for your comment. I think I see Joe?
John.
John.
Hi, surprise, it's not John, it's me, Robin Morgan, Brattleboro. I just wanted to say, first of all, I really wanted to thank Emma for speaking. I think especially after experiencing a traumatic incident, that takes a lot of bravery to talk about your experience and your thoughts, and what you said really resonated with me. I've heard a lot of people, including Officer Evans, mention that a big part of what this money is trying to address is people's perception of whether they feel safe. And that I just think that it's important that we recognize that's what we're doing here. We are addressing a perception and doing something to make people feel better. I think that, you know, I'm not going to try to pretend like anything I'm going to say is going to change how people are voting, because I think it's pretty obvious that everyone is going to vote in favor of this. But I also, like Far, feel really disappointed at how quickly initiatives like this are able to be incorporated, and yet how long the board has been sitting on the community safety review recommendations without taking any action to review or enact a lot of the recommendations there. And I think that it was also disturbing to hear community members referred to as cockroaches. But I think that that security officer did have a point, that people are going to flee the space if they have a perception that what they were planning on doing there is going to not be possible, but they're not going to vanish, and neither are the things that drove them to whatever the thing was that they wanted to do in the parking garage. They're just going to go to a different place in the town. So we are not solving any crime here. We're just moving it to a different place. And those needs or causes of those crimes still exist, and they're not going to be solved until we do something that actually creates more safety for people and meets more needs, not just creating a perception of safety. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you very much, Robin. All right, board, so we've got a motion on, we got a motion on the table.
I need to say something. I need to address something or I'm gonna pop.
Can you give me 1 moment?
Sure.
Thank you. So we have a motion on the table that was moved by Liz to authorize these 2 security services. We've heard from the town manager that we will have a update in 8 to 10 weeks, and that will include sort of a little bit of an assessment on how this is working, and that this is a pilot program, and we'll hear from there. So let's, I'm very cognizant of the time, and we've got other things to discuss tonight, so if you've got some additional comments or questions before we move forward and if we have amendments to the motion or something like that, that would be timely, but, yeah, so final comments, Peter Yoder.
I just want to address a couple of things. Speaking on my behalf, just my own behalf, I was sworn in on March 27th. This is directed at Dick, and it was a week later that I was addressing the problems in our parking garage. All right, so this has been a priority of mine to protect that area and to protect the people in downtown. All the issues that you bring up are valid. All the issues that you bring up are things that I am personally addressing. So I just want you to know that. Emma, what happened to you was tragic. I'm horribly sorry that that happened to you, and it was a catalyst to move this conversation forward, a very needed conversation. Another thing that I talk to a lot are narratives. The gentleman from the security got up and he said that when you have a presence downtown, it's like flicking a light on and the cockroaches scatter. It was not a reference to the people and the citizens of this town. It was just merely a reference onto, Ivan, you can say what you want. You know what he meant. You know what he meant.
Actually, Peter.
Let's not parse out words like
Peter,
that.
I just want to be very clear, though. We don't direct stuff at people in the public, right? They speak to us, and then.
Yep, no, and I appreciate that, but I should have a recourse to speak back. So I'm sorry, those are my priorities. I did not interpret what the gentleman said in a negative fashion towards the township of Brattleboro or the people that reside within it. Sorry, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, in that case, so the motion is, oh, I had it. I will reread it, though, for us. So the motion is to authorize the town to staff to engage private security from Securitas for $39 per hour for a total of $2,184 a week for the Brattleboro Transportation Center, and the Hill Street Security for $35 per hour for a total of $19.60 per week for the Brooks Memorial Library, Recreation Center, and Municipal Center. All those in favor?
Aye.
That's going to carry 5-0. Thank you very much. AC Evans, thank you very much for the presentation and your answering all of our questions.
You're welcome.
Great. And we're going to move on to agenda item 8B, which is financial software. Yes.
And Finance Director Kim Frost is going to present some thoughts around improved financial software, about which staff would like to return to your next meeting with a proposal.
Oh. Great. Welcome.
Thank you. So, this, as John said, we just wanted to give you some background on the idea of getting some new financial software. Right now in the town, we use a very old antiquated system called NIMRIC, and it is very disjointed. It's not easy to get data from. It is very cumbersome, and even just to do our financial reports, we need to take those reports and then hand enter them into Excel to kind of get our financials. We really would like to look, we've been viewing some different options that are out there that would give us some really, like, bring us into the 21st century on, maybe being able to have community engagement where budgets could be online and the community could go through the budget and kind of see like, oh, if we move something here or if we move something there. It would mitigate any errors, which I'm not saying that we have errors, but we catch errors all the time, right? But it would really like make it where there were none. It would make it more efficient and more transparent. We would be able to hopefully pay utility bills online and be able to use that portal to pay with a credit card and be able to communicate with town staff if you had an issue with your bill, all online. So it would be time saving, it would be scenario planning, it would be being able to take our strategic plan and the goals of this board and align it with our budget and be able to do that all within a software package. So, and also asset management, which is huge for DPW and all the roads and the assets of the town, to be able to do that planning and forward thinking with our assets would be, you know, another great asset. So.
Great.
We'd like to bring you back something.
So, thank you very much, Kim. There isn't a motion to be made tonight because this is just sort of a preliminary, let the board know. So I guess Rod, questions or comments before we move on? I don't know who's had their hand.
Liz was first.
Liz?
Kim, how secure is the system, and how will we keep our financial data secure?
So it would be cloud-based. The couple of software companies that we have spoke with, they have redundancy, which means it's kept on a couple of servers. So it's all like locked down within their systems, and it's not kept in just one place. So in case something were to happen somewhere, that they would be able to keep it secure in other places.
And so there's some sort of protection from cyber ransom?
Yes, yes.
Thank you, Liz. Daniel?
I don't think I've been in a meeting in recent memory where we had a preliminary kind of little taster of something. Just kind of curious why, and why not just have this be the whole thing next week? What was the thinking? Is it because it's going to be massively expensive, or you weren't sure whether the board would go for it, or?
Yeah.
Just wanted to come to the meeting?
I think that, you know, when you're.
I'm likely to
Yeah.
be in favor of it. I think all the things that you're trying to do with it sound like really good things for us to do. I'm just kind of curious.
I think that when you're looking at spending money on a finance software package, I don't think that that's like the first thing that we all think about, right? There are other initiatives that maybe, you know, we would think about. So I think that giving you all these reasons and letting you think about it and understand why it's so important is important.
Yeah.
Daniel likes pie charts.
I mean, I actually
You would have
think that-
plenty of pie
Right.
charts.
What you're describing here, you know, in the time that I've worked on this board, like, would be really helpful, right? Like, I think you mentioned this on Saturday during our kind of goal-setting agenda-y thing. You know, and one of the things he talked about was like trend projections, you know, and that kind of analysis. And like, I've always wanted to have more of those tools available to us during our kind of, you know, anytime we're working really with, you know, budgets. And so it sounds like it's going to be great. Do we have a ballpark of a price tag, seeing as we're in preview mode here?
Well,
We're still looking. We have a couple of contenders that we'll bring back to you.
Okay.
We are in the talks with 2 vendors right now.
Teaser.
I've got a couple comments, but Franz, Peter?
I have one or two. Kim, at our retreat on Saturday, we heard from a number of your colleagues in the department heads about how they would benefit from having new types of software that would enable them to do better managing of their departments. So I'm wondering how much this package that you're looking at would affect those needs in other departments in the administration. Would this be sort of a something that everybody gets to use or benefits everybody? Or how widespread would the effects of this type of package be on the town government as a whole?
So it would affect all departments because it would also incorporate like purchasing and purchase orders and encumbering. So it would affect every department. If we could get every department that actually takes in money, that it would affect them because we would be able to get them hopefully online. So that would be, say, the town clerk or the assessors, and then, of course, treasury. And it would affect DPW in a great way. They would be able to really, utilize this tool. So I think it would affect a lot of departments, probably all of them.
Thank you.
Peter?
Yeah, no, I mean, having worked with similar software, I know that how huge of an improvement and how simple this would make your life is just, I imagine you must be doing silent claps around it, so, yeah.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay.
Excellent.
One more thought.
Okay. Yes, Liz?
So you're talking about your software, and we heard software on Saturday, and I'm just kind of wondering, I think Franz brought this up, is there some sort of integrated new software for towns like ours that talk about all the new software needs that we were talking about? Is there like one for a town of 12,000?
Microsoft Towns.
Yeah, so there is. There are big software developers that are looking to get into the municipal market. And these softwares are actually people who have worked in government prior and are accountants or auditors or purchasers, or they've worked in all aspects of government, and they know what makes government tick and how to make that better.
I just hope we could look at this issue on a holistic basis, because I know DPW everybody wants new software. So maybe we shouldn't talk about it department by department.
Yeah, it would basically be for everybody. This package would be for,
It's, what Kim is looking at is really considered an enterprise software, which does cut across all departments, so.
yep.
Yeah, fully support the idea. I'm excited for the proposal. My hope would be that if we could get a proposal back before the board so that you could implement something before you begin work on FY25, if it's that critical, which is what it sounds like. And then finally, I would just say, some of the work that I enjoy the most on the select board is actually these smaller, like maybe not smaller, but like less flashy things that are sometimes, pushed to the side for a long time, but are really critical to invest in to help with the running of our town. And I see this as one of those kind of projects, so I'm very excited about that. And I appreciate sort of the teaser trailer for the full presentation for the select board. Any other comments from the board before I open up to the public? No? I see one hand on Zoom, which I'll go with first, and then nope, okay.
It's David Levenbach.
David, welcome.
Thank you, David Levenbach.
Ooh, David,
District
I'm gonna stop you for a second. Your audio is pretty poor, so if you can get a little closer, so we can hear
Okay,
you.
fair enough. Can you hear me now?
A little better.
Yeah, it's just Okay.
Quiet on the speakers. Oh, if can VCTV hear you?
I'd hate to shout.
That's okay. We're used to it. All right, I think go ahead and try again.
Okay, David Levenbach, District 3. As Mr. Potter's memo in the backup material indicated, he solicited the views of the Finance Committee on a number of budgetary process issues. And as part of that, we looked at this question of a new financial software system with a pay option. And I wanted to just reaffirm that the Finance Committee is very interested in having such a proposal coming forward and expect that we would support it. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much, David. For those armchair select board members at home, David Levenbach is the chair of the Finance Committee, so we appreciate that perspective and that reminder. So, and seeing no other hands in Zoom or in the room and no other comments from the select board, I thank you very much, Kim, for the quick presentation, and we're excited to see you back soon. All right, so we're gonna move on to agenda item 8C, which is
Yes.
the Williams Western intersection recommendation from the Traffic Safety Committee, and invite up is Dan Tyler.
No, unless he wants to, but I was going to invite Planning Director Sue Fillion, who is online, up on the screen, and she's here to discuss a recent recommendation from the Traffic Safety Committee.
Excellent. I apologize for my.
Thanks for having me. So I wanted to bring to your attention something that the Traffic Safety Committee has been grappling with for quite a few years now, and the town has actually been grappling with it for well over 20 years. And that is the intersection of Western Avenue and William Street by the Vermont Country Deli. As you know, there are two legs of William Street there that kind of form a Y around the business, and it's a successful business, so there's a lot going on there. And it's been on the town's radar, like I said, for well over 20 years of needing improvements. I would say for the past year, we've had a lot of complaints at the Traffic Safety Committee, and we're really at a point where we feel like we can't there's not much for the committee to do with this. It really needs, if it's an important project to the town, it's really going to need some sort of traffic engineering study to kind of look at options for the intersection. There was a plan that was done in 2019 by a local engineering firm. It was basically one concept plan with 4 variations to it. Traffic Safety Committee did have a public meeting, and it had invited neighbors at that time in 2019. And basically that concept plan involves shutting down the western leg of the William Street and making the eastern leg two-way traffic. There were concerns from the abutters that lived around there. Some were not happy that it was going to be the west leg shut down. So at the end of that meeting, it was kind of agreed that it should go back to the engineer with some other alternatives. Unfortunately, we didn't have the money to hire them to do more work. And then we had the retaining wall failure. And so all the money that had been set aside in the capital plan had been expended. And so now we're at this situation where we don't have the funding for it. I'm not here tonight thinking that we're going to solve it as much as maybe getting this on your radar as it's a capital plan that's, we're going to need to budget for coming up. So, and just kind of sharing the Traffic Safety Committee's opinion that we really need to work with transportation engineers, traffic engineers to kind of look at that segment and evaluate other options, not just have one concept plan. So I was just here to communicate this on behalf of the Traffic Safety Committee.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Sue. So board, there's a motion to be made. If I could get one of you.
Sure.
What is this putative motion?
It's right here. There you go.
To authorize town staff.
I'm deciding whether I wish to make this motion or not.
I'll make it.
I will.
Okay, Liz.
I move
Good
to
Lord.
authorize town staff to commission a study completed by a traffic engineer to look at various alternative improvement concepts at the Western Avenue and William Street intersection. And I would like to address that.
Oh, well, because you were willing to make the motion and Franz
Absolutely.
wasn't, please. You have the favor.
as the Select Board member to the Traffic Safety Committee, I am quite familiar with this, as I'm sure that Daniel is, because it's been going on for so many years. Mike, and I am a great believer in authorizing the Traffic Safety Committee to hire a traffic engineer to give this work their expertise. I'm also, when I first heard about this plan, I was quite concerned about what is essentially a land swap, which is some of the deli property for some town property. And I want to make sure that when the engineer is looking at solutions, we really need a bare bones solution, because I don't think that the taxpayers of Brattleboro need to present a Cadillac plan that benefits a specific commercial enterprise. And so I think that that needs to be kept in mind, although there are very obvious benefits to solving this traffic problem at this location. I don't think that we should be spending our taxpayer dollars for something that the commercial enterprise should be contributing to.
Thank you very much, Liz. Other board members? Daniel, I saw Daniel's hand first.
My pen, but that's okay. Just a question for Sue, really. I don't recall this came before me in the 2 years that I was on the committee, but I'd be curious to know what the abutters' concerns were about closing the western leg of the street.
Gosh, that was in 2019. I'm trying to remember. I do see that some of those abutters are actually on this call, so maybe they'll speak to it when Molly gets a chance to speak. But I think it had, yeah, I'm sorry.
That's
I
okay.
can't really remember. I did check the notes and it wasn't very specific about what their concerns were.
Okay. I'm assuming that they were big enough that it stopped the kind of project moving forward twice.
Well, if I could recall what people have come to the Traffic Safety Committee, you know, they have X access now, and they'll have less access in the future if a road is curtailed.
Okay. Thank you. Daniel? Is that
Yeah, I'm all done.
okay? Other board members? Yeah, from.
So the reason I was reluctant to make the motion is that I wonder why there's no price tag attached. How much is this going to cost to get this study done? I think that would normally be a part of a motion like this, wouldn't it?
Could be.
So what are we talking about here?
We did authorize this committee to hire a traffic engineer on an annualized basis. Would that cover the cost for this, Sue?
I don't know. We didn't go out and solicit, you know, any figures of how it was going to be, because we actually don't. I mean, that funding could go towards it, but I can't recall what that amount was. I don't know that it will cover it. I'm just trying to think. We are currently doing intersection design work at Green Street and High Street, and I think, gosh, that's over 10,000. But that's more, you know, getting it ready for construction. So,
So
yeah, we're gonna need to look into it. I mean, there's some complexities here. We want public meetings, so we're gonna have to go out and, you know, we may or may not have the funding in the budget for that.
So you'll come back to us at that time to authorize it. Thank you.
So
Let me,
does that make sense?
well, let me just throw in that I remember from several years ago when I was on the Finance Committee, that this was part of one of the long-term financial plans that we looked at. There were sort of every year there was a project that would be in study format to come back, and then the subsequent year there would be an actual proposal to accomplish the project. And I remember this showing up, but I could be totally wrong, but I remember something like $50,000 for the study. I hope that's more than it would actually need, but anyway, I'd just be reluctant to vote in favor of this until we have some cost estimate attached. So when you say that they'll come back with it, does that mean we won't vote on this tonight, or what are we gonna do?
John?
Yeah, I'll try, Sue, and correct me if I'm wrong, but, so Franz, this would authorize the staff to go out and try to find somebody that would do this work, and we would then, you know, if we needed to award a bid, for example, then that would come back to the board for your approval.
That sounds very reasonable.
That's correct.
Okay, great.
And I do not think it will be 50,000. I think it, you know, it might be in the $20,000 range, maybe a little bit more. The problem, that money that had been showing in that plan was used for some of the expenses related to the retaining wall.
Yeah, and my memory could be quite inaccurate as well. So, okay.
Yeah, so does the motion need to be amended then? Because I think,
Dick's got his hand up.
Yeah, I think the word commission
yeah,
would change to authorize the town staff to seek a bid.
Yeah.
Seek a bid.
yeah. Was part of the idea behind this that if it was below the $10,000, it wouldn't require
Then it
a
wouldn't
board?
require that,
Okay,
so-
that, I understand now.
Okay.
So, okay, I understand. So I think board, we have kind of, we can make the motion as it stands with the understanding that if it's above the $10,000, so below $10,000, that doesn't require select board approval. So we can make this motion, and in the record, we're saying, look, if it's above $10,000, you're gonna have to come back to us. This is not sufficient as approval. But if it's below $10,000, we've authorized this commission. That would be one way to do it. Another way would be to amend the motion language to more thoroughly reflect that. And I leave it up to you guys.
I'm happy to leave it as is, as
Okay.
long as we understand
Yeah,
what the funding decision is.
I see. Okay. Any other board members on that? Okay, Peter, I don't know if you spoke on this yet.
No.
Yes, okay. Yeah, I think it's, I support it. I think anyone who lives in the town of Brattleboro knows that this is an area that needs to be looked at. So I definitely support the commission of a study. With that, I'm going to open it up to the public. I saw Dick's hand, but I had hands on Zoom first, so I'm going to look there. And I see the first hand is
Ken
Ken?
Roswell.
Great.
Okay, can everybody hear me?
Yes, hi, Ken, welcome. Just want to
Okay.
introduce yourself for the record and tell us where you're from.
Yep, Ken Roswell, 516 William Street. I guess that's District 2. We're 2 houses behind the deli. I'd just like to reiterate some of the things that Sue mentioned. That this has been going on for decades, and every year it gets a little bit worse as the deli's business increases. The traffic problems increase. Somebody mentioned somewhere along the line, I can't remember who it was, that they kind of felt that Western Avenue and vicinity of William Street is actually the deli's parking lot. Cars pulling in and out, and people just parking anywhere they want to park. So if that'll give you a verbal idea of what we got. You know, the intersection, as you already know, is clogged. It's difficult to make safe turns either into William Street or many times trying to get out. Got a combination of the traffic on William Street, the short sight line coming from the west if you're using the east leg. You got in busy times, you've got the pedestrian traffic to worry about, kids running around. So it's obvious people going to the deli or stopping there more interested in getting a sandwich than wondering regarding of where they're parking or in what manner they're parking. Many times it doesn't have to be a peak business time for William Street to either be blocked or partially blocked because people park on the east leg. And then you've also got the trucks making deliveries. It's a loading dock on the eastern leg. Then you got the trash hauler emptying the dumpster on the eastern leg. So if you shut down the western leg, that eastern leg is going to really not be adequate to service everybody trying to use William Street. Not just the local residents, but you got people that pass through there. It's a main pass-through area. There's a lot of trucks that come through here too. The other thing that we're concerned about with the congestion there is emergency services. I mean, I believe it was New Year's Day. I saw a Golden Cross coming up through there, and I could just tell by watching the lights on the top of the vehicle that it got stuck in traffic trying to get out onto William Street. I had to wait. I can just imagine an engine coming down from Station 2 that supports this area in a busy time trying to make a right-hand turn into that narrow William Street and trying to get through there in an expedited manner. And your ladder truck's going to have the same situation, even more so. And I've driven emergency service, so I can speak to that on a personal basis. You got too many customers for the number of on-street parking spaces. My best estimate would be watching it at a busy time. You've got at least 25, 30 cars that could be possibly trying to get into the deli.
And I'm just going to
then-
ask you to complete your thought here on this one.
Okay. As a final summary, there's two things that needed to be added to the plans or the thoughts. A, do nothing because you're not going to make the intersection any better by redesigning it. Doing nothing is probably the best thing. The other thing, the other suggestion is making it a clean, plain, normal intersection, which would mean relocating the deli to another location. And I think that's probably the best alternative. It may be the most expensive, but on the other hand, it would solve the problem. Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you very much. Got some other abutters. I believe.
You're looking, Emma Schneider?
Yep.
This is Arthur Davis.
Yeah, it is Arthur Davis. I didn't have the option to change my name once I got on here.
Welcome,
yeah.
Arthur.
Arthur Davis, District 2, and a member of the Traffic Safety Committee. Just wanted to reiterate that again. We have received. We've spent a lot of time talking about it in the last year. Various complaints that have come before the committee, and I mean, Ken talked about a lot of the things that we've talked about, certainly at our monthly meetings. But additionally, just thinking about especially this passageway as a big route, especially for pedestrians and cyclists, as well as cars. It really needs attention, and I think it's in many ways it's only a matter of time before someone gets really hurt. And I think that it's the least the town can do to spend some time and a little bit of money studying a way to try to make it better. So that's it for me. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Arthur. See, Norma is next. And then I've got one more hand, and then we'll take final comments from the board.
I think Dick has questions.
I think he put his hand down.
Are we ready?
Yes, we can hear you. Can you just tell us who you are and where you're
Okay.
from for the record?
I am Norma Willingham, and I live on 475 William Street, about 5 houses down from the deli. And I want to start by addressing what the concerns were about eliminating one of the roads. And it's that it would increase the traffic backup of people trying to leave William Street, particularly if somebody were trying to make a left-hand turn, that it's already challenging enough as it is to try to get out of William Street, and that the plan that was made at that point seemed to consider the needs of the town for safety, which is significant. And then the second concern was the needs of the deli and not to inconvenience the deli and to perhaps even increase the deli's parking. And that the needs of the people of Brattleboro who are going back and forth on William Street and needing to get onto Western Ave was not a concern at all. And so I would like to suggest that the motion be amended to include what the goals of the traffic study are. And are the goals of the traffic study safety and to make things better for the deli, or is it safety and to not further inconvenience the residents of Brattleboro who live on William Street, or the residents who may be needing to pass through William Street at one point or another. So I would hope that, the needs of the people of Brattleboro would be considered. And I would ask that the local residents be included earlier rather than later in the planning process. If there is a plan being made, that we are brought in to have our concerns addressed in the plan.
Great. Thank you, Norma. We've got one more hand, and that is... Oh, I'm sorry. I thought your hand went back down, Dick. I apologize. Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, there's just all these abutters, and I just want to give them a moment to...
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, I'm Kenneth Roswell, also at 516 Williams Street. Between my father and Norma, most of what I was going to say has already been said, but I just wanted to...
That's okay.
Basically wanted the study to include, I know my father kind of said it, but the option of A, doing nothing, and B, moving the deli to another location and making, a nice clean 90-degree intersection. I'd like that to be, have the engineers at least consider that, because there really isn't another, the plans that were drawn up in 2019. I was at that meeting, and judging by the reaction of the Traffic Safety Committee, we probably set a record of the number of people that showed up to that meeting to oppose those plans. They're just they're not good plans for the situation. So I would ask that, since right now we're spitballing stuff, let's include everything. That would be my suggestion.
Great. Thank you very much, Kenneth. And final is Dick DeGray. I apologize for not recognizing you sooner because you had your hand up earlier. Clearly, it wasn't of the highest priority.
First of all, I want to applaud Vermont Deli. They bought the gas station, the old Fleming's gas station next door, and they created additional parking. Shame on them for having such a successful business, which actually, when you look at it, brings a lot of revenue into the town and a 1% rooms and meals tax. One of the things when I was looking at, I don't know if you people looked at the conceptual drawings here, but there's 2 conceptual drawings that have parking on the northern side of the street. And given the fact that Western Ave is going to be repaved, I believe in 2024, or is it 2025, the Western Ave section? Dan's here, does Dan know that? 25. I would think that that street is probably going to have to be widened to actually have parking on that northern side of the street and it does show a couple of bulb outs. And I think that creates some challenges also, which, and then there's a crosswalk there, and, we did have somebody hit in a crosswalk up there a couple of years ago. So I'm in favor of the study. It's been a problem for years, way back when the original owners, before any of you were probably in town, except for maybe Peter, they tried to address that with a parking area if you were looking at the Vermont Deli to the left-hand side where that house sits up on the knoll. And actually, the town shot that proposal down. Even if they approved it, it still wouldn't be adequate enough for the traffic that they're facing today. I mean, they have a huge successful business, and I'm sure you'd have a really difficult time for trying to get them to move to a different location. I know I wouldn't. So, but if that's going to be part of this study, I would hope that it would be, what's the time frame on this, for this study?
Just ask you to finish your comment, Dick.
Okay, just a question, then I'm all done.
Okay, great. Thank you. Yeah, so that's all the comments from the public board. That a good question from Dick. The time frame. Clearly, they're going to have to come back to us if it's going to cost more than $10,000. Sue, if you can speak to it briefly on a time frame.
Yeah, I don't have a sense of a time frame. We're going to have to reach out to a couple of consultants, and I would imagine I'd like to have something done by budget season, so that it can be considered. Because, like I said, it's probably going to be a large capital plan if it was to move forward.
Great, thank you, Sue. And then, yeah, we're not really even in the spitballing phase. We're in we should probably start spitballing on this phase. So I appreciate the comments before from the public and the abutters. I just would really encourage the planning department and the traffic safety committee to just continue to recognize that this is a really important issue to a lot of members in our community, and that we make sure that we welcome as much public participation and involvement as early on in the process as possible, so that we're really addressing all of the needs of that troubled intersection, so that we're making sure that people are safe and that we get the best possible result from the study, and then pass a study for whatever the good solution is for that issue. With that, is there any other final comments, board members?
I guess I feel like probably I should weigh in, because William Street was like my work home for 25 years, and having been up and down that road, sensitive to what everybody who abuts that property had witnessed is a big concern, having, kind of come and gone and opted to go out the other way most of the time just to avoid that mess. I'll be really curious to see what this study brings forward as something that might resolve all these issues. To that, I think we can include the piece about moving the deli, though I don't think that that's a realistic thing at all, and it feels a little foolish to even include that into the conversation. But if it needs to be put in there, then I guess we should. If the abutters feel that strongly about it, then maybe it's an option. But I think it's silly.
Okay, thank you very much, Peter.
All right.
Anything else from other board members? No. In that case, Franz, Liz made a motion to authorize the town to staff to commission a study be completed by a traffic engineer to look at various alternative improvement concepts at the Western Avenue and William Street intersection. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That's going to carry 5-0. Thank you very much, Sue, and thank you very much to the hard work of the Traffic Safety Committee. We look forward to seeing where that goes. With that, we've gone over a bit, so we'll take a 5-minute break and reconvene at 8:25. It is 8:26, so we're going to reconvene the Brattleboro Selectboard meeting, and we're going to move on to agenda item 8D, which is the preliminary utility fund budget discussion. So, board. Every year, we have actually 3 budgets that we talk about: the FY budget, and then we have the utility fund budget and the parking fund budget. And while the FY budget is a much longer conversation, these two budgets usually take just 2 sessions. And so
It's actually called the general fund.
the general fund, or the fiscal year budget, I guess is sort of what I'm referring to, but the general fund budget, yeah. And so the general fund budget takes a lot more discussion. The utility and parking fund budgets take just 2 meetings, hopefully, because we want to get them done by July 1st. So this is just the preliminary discussion on both of those budgets, starting with utility fund. And inviting up
Yeah,
anybody.
and we're going to get your thoughts and questions around projected revenues, expenses, maintenance of cash balance, and possible rates.
Excellent.
So Assistant Town Manager Patrick Moreland will step us through this information with Public Works Director Dan Tyler and Finance Director Kim Frost available to support.
Excellent.
Patrick?
Thank you, sir. Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
As you will notice, the utility fund, as it's been for the last several years, it's kind of a team effort. And so I'm going to attempt to walk the board a sort of high-level discussion about the fiscal '24 utility fund budget. I'm going to turn it over to DPW Director Dan Tyler and Superintendent Pete Lynch to talk a little bit about utility capital, not just for fiscal '24, but for the foreseeable future, I believe going out about 10 years. Then we'll bring it back, and I, with the assistance of Finance Director Kim Frost, will talk a little bit about a cash reconciliation that we do for these enterprise budgets. As Mr. Goodnow pointed out, the utility fund and in fact parking fund are managed fundamentally differently than the general fund, which was pointed out. They are also accounted for very, very differently, whereas the general fund is managed in what's called a modified accrual. The utility fund is managed on full accrual basis, and those are accounting terms that Kim may need to help me to explain, but the importance of that will become more relevant when we begin to start talking about potential changes to the utility rates. So we'll start with just a general overview of the proposed fiscal '24 general fund budget. I'll be speaking first to revenues, and with that, I would be speaking to the first page of the sort of detailed budget for the utility fund. And then when it comes to expenditures, I like to speak more from the summarized expenditures that are presented on the page titled Cash Reconciliation. This tends to bundle the expenditures into meaningful categories: salaries, benefits, heating, repairing, operating, depreciation, et cetera.
For those following along at home, that's page 92 of the 142 packet. Sorry, Patrick, go ahead.
Thank you. No, I appreciate it. Good thing to point out. So when I speak to expenditures, I'll likely be speaking from that page. If the board has any specific questions about individual line items, thankfully Dan and Pete are here and they can back that up. So to begin with, the fiscal '24 utility fund budget has revenues projected at $6,511,500. Now this is $268,160 less than fiscal '23. Of course, this is the net impact of all changes to the proposed revenue. So some are going up and some are going down, but in general, revenues are $268,000 less than in fiscal '23. Now, two of the primary revenue sources for the utility fund are water rents and sewer rents. Those are currently shown in the budget as per the ordinance that the board passed back in 2020. So what does that mean? That means that water rents are projected to go up by 6% and sewer rents are projected to go up by 1%. That's the way the budget is presently structured. Other notable changes to the revenue in this particular budget. In the fiscal '23 budget, there was $440,000 included as grant revenue. This was for a project, I'm hoping the board will remember, it was a joint initiative between the town of Brattleboro and the Brattleboro Development Credit Corporation to improve the water and sewer capacity at the Exit 1 Industrial Park. That project is now complete. That grant-funded initiative, excuse me, is currently in the let's clean it up and get the paperwork submitted properly so we can get paid. But that was a one-time or very infrequent sort of a grant-funded project. And we don't expect that revenue to continue into fiscal '24. The only other notable change to revenue is that there will no longer be in fiscal '24 and years beyond any interest from the parking system. As the board will recall, back in, I believe it was 2018, an inter-fund loan was authorized. The utility fund sits on some cash, and rather than borrow money from a bank, we borrowed it from the ratepayers. So the parking system borrowed it from the ratepayers in the utility fund and returned the money. In total, that loan is now paid off. It was paid off with interest at 2.5% for each of the years for which there was an outstanding balance. Now that that loan's retired, there'll be no more interest income to the utility fund. And that covers the revenue side of the fiscal '24 utility fund. Switching over to expenses, we can see that for fiscal '24, expenses are proposed to rise by 2%, from $6 million. Well, that can't be right. I'm missing a digit here in my notes. Forgive me. $6,330,313 in fiscal '23 to $6,478,478 in fiscal '24. Now, as I mentioned, I'd be speaking about expenditures from the sort of summarized budget as presented on the cash reconciliation page. What you will see is that staff salaries are expected to rise by $59,808. That's across all utility operations, so that's the water plant, the wastewater plant, the distribution team that works on the pipes in between those two facilities. That includes the portion of Director Tyler and Superintendent Lynch's salaries that are picked up by the utility fund. In total, salaries are expected to rise by 4.8%. And like I said, this covers 18 employees and a portion of these two. Benefits are planned to rise by $48,908 or 8.9%. This covers a range of employee benefits like health insurance, retirement, HRA liability, etc. While the percentage is kind of high, 8.9%, the absolute dollars is much less significant at $48,000. And I would just remind the board and the public that this is a small pool of employees. So if somebody has a child, that's a significant impact to the, we deal with small sample size issues here. So benefits, like I say, are going up by $48,000. Another significant cost which is hitting the utility fund, and in fact hitting all of the town's funds, is heating fuel. Primarily because there's been a significant cost increase. You go back a couple of years ago, 2 years ago, we were buying fuel oil at $1.49. That all changed this last heating season. And so there's been a significant cost increase, and we're sort of planning for that to continue. I think that's probably reasonable. But I would also point out that there are some other reasons why heating fuel is up within the utility fund, one of which is we are mid-project in a water treatment facility. So right now we're at that sort of awkward moment where you've got two different facilities operating where ordinarily there would only be one. And the second reason is that the wastewater treatment plant is such a significant user of heating fuel, not just for HVAC purposes, but because fuel oil is used as a tool in the processing of sludge. Sludge needs to be heated as it passes through the wastewater treatment system. And so there are a variety of uses, not just, air conditioned comfort for the employees. It's actually a process expense. Altogether, heating fuel is up 52,000 in fiscal '24. Operating costs, which are effectively everything that isn't salary and benefits, things like interest and depreciation, the actual stuff of the utility fund is seeing expenses going up by $55,082. There are some decreases. Sludge removal at Pleasant Valley. Pleasant Valley is, of course, the water treatment plant. In years past, the manner in which that facility would function is there would be settling of materials out of the water that would then be collected in, I believe they called them lagoons, and then that material would need to be transported and disposed of elsewhere. But a couple of years ago, there was a fairly significant project to connect the water treatment facility with the wastewater treatment plant, and that allowed for the processing of that sort of material without as much expense. So we can see the beginnings of that starting to go down. And in addition, odor abatement or I think we call it abatement, or dealing with odors is going down. In a couple of different locations, and this is the continued work of the department to fine-tune the system such that it doesn't create odors, and secondly, and perhaps even more significantly, better permit compliance with some of our larger industrial users. So the combination of those two things is leading to fewer odor-related issues across the town and across the system, and of course the costs for that are also going down. But some costs are going up, some of these operating costs, and one of them is, for example, in telephones and radios. This is going up $10,000 in fiscal '24. This is where some additional expenses are going to be incurred for enhancements to the SCADA system. The SCADA system, I'm gonna forget what that stands for.
Computer aided something probably.
Yeah. No, it's, let me just get that SCADA, because I've got it in here. Something control and data acquisition. Systematic control and data acquisition, I believe is what it stands for. The SCADA system is a really important cost-saving measure that was begun its use in the utility system long before I got here. And as you can imagine, it's a very complex system with a lot of different infrastructure at a lot of different locations around town. You have water tanks, you have water pipes, you have dams, you have reservoirs, and in years past, a long time ago, a lot of staff needed to be maintained in order to keep eyes on a system and know when it's time to like shut a valve or open a valve or something along those lines. The SCADA system allows for this to be managed and monitored remotely from cell phone, from a computer like this. And so the system can be set and designed to, within certain tolerances, everything is okay. When these tolerances are exceeded in one way or another, somebody who's on call can be alerted to, you need to check into the system and see what's going on. With the improvements to the water treatment facility, there are going to be some additional operating costs and internet-related expenses in terms of operating SCADA at new locations. And then finally, within operating costs, there's the transfer out. And as you may recall from the discussions of the general fund budget, our new finance director took a long look at the methodology that I believe it was John O'Connor who first set up the interfund transfer system, and began to recognize that the methodology was antiquated and that there were certain generalized costs that weren't being included, things like human resources that spend time with the utility fund employee base, but hadn't been included in the interfund transfer. So now that that's been recalibrated and broadened to include the full range of expenses, not just, the town manager's expense and so on, but including the HR department and other costs, the transfer out is gone up because the utility can and should be paying more to the general fund for what are general fund operations. And then finally and lastly, I would say there are some decreases in repairs and maintenance lines. There's a modest decrease in depreciation and also a decrease in interest on debt. That's the sort of high-level, big picture view of the fiscal '24 utility fund budget. If there are any questions, I'd suggest you ask Dan.
Excellent. Would this be an appropriate time to talk about rates and?
It's always an appropriate time to talk about rates.
I was just looking for it in the memo. I think you just said that.
It's at the end.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, here it is. So yeah, that if the board was interested in changing the rates, that we should kind of give the staff an idea about that tonight so that it can be brought before us on.
Yeah, because the practice has been that the rates are codified into the town ordinance, if the board was inclined to let staff know that we think it's a change within this current 5-year period is called for, we could get to work on a ordinance change and come back at the next meeting. And in addition to finalizing the budget, you could do a first reading.
Could someone sort of walk us through the 3 options that were discussed in the memo? Briefly, or would you rather us just ask questions about?
I was gonna do the budget and then the capital and then the cash reconciliation and then finish up with the rates. But I can take them out of order.
There's a sub-agenda to this agenda item. I apologize. You're right. I just got excited about that. Okay.
I knew you would.
So I apologize. We're just doing budget, right? Okay. So board, questions, comments on the presentation? Thank you very much, Patrick.
Of course.
No?
I guess the only question that I have
Yes.
generally is whether or not, at town meeting, there were expenses that the state, we were getting a loan, but the state was going to pay us back 100%. Are there still things like that we could be applying to, or is this set now, these costs?
I think these costs are set, and later in the agenda, we have 3 applications that fall under that state program, and I think we'll continue to see applications as we develop projects that we can run through that program. Those are more applied to capital expenses than
Operating?
operating expenses. But yeah, we definitely we have projects submitted to the priority list now. We hope to hear back soon, and then, we can decide if those are something we want to pursue or not, depending on what the subsidy offer is.
I had one more question about this Hinsdale Bridge. I know it's connected to the bridge, but the water main replacement, does Hinsdale pay, they must pay for the utilities that they use?
This is so as part of the, you're talking the capital.
Yeah,
Yeah.
So you've moved ahead just like
I've
I
moved
did,
ahead.
but,
Sorry.
You're at least on the next part of this section instead of the very last one. Yeah, I'm realizing how we
wait.
formed the agenda.
Yeah.
It's maybe a little confusing.
Yeah.
So Dick, I saw your hand, but if it's not on specifically the FY24 budget section, it is? Okay, please.
I know where you are. I didn't jump ahead. In revenue, we used to take outside refuge, and it used to be a considerable income stream for us. Does that have a different name? Because I can't find it, so if somebody could show it to me.
It's under the sewer category. It's the sewage disposal revenue, $358,550.
Okay, thank you.
I have a couple of things. Minor points, I guess, but in the expenses, the electric bill projected at $233,000 for next year. Do we not have any photovoltaic capacity included in the utilities? Or if we do, is it possible to have more? I mean, it just seems like a good place to target some of our sustainability efforts.
You know where those are?
So, so the town is engaged fairly significantly in the net metering program. We're the largest single off-taker, for example, to the solar array at the Wyndham Solid Waste Management District, which is the largest solar array in Vermont. And we are the largest single off-taker from that. When that set of, when those off-taker agreements were established, the town took its, I think it was, gosh, forgive me, I don't even remember exactly. Was it the top 15? Was it the top 18? It was something like that. The largest 15 or 18 electrical accounts were all assigned to the net metering credits. And so the savings that would come from participation in those is actually already shown, because the rates would be significantly higher had we not participated in those programs. Does that make sense?
No.
Okay.
I mean, I'm sure it does make sense, but I don't understand how it relates to my question.
Okay. I'll try a second time. We are paying less for electricity on these accounts than we otherwise would have if we weren't participating in a organized solar net metering program.
Okay, so how about, can we do more of that and pay still less? I mean, I'm just wondering if this is part of the planned solar array on top of the transportation center. I mean, it's planned by me.
Yes. We should talk about that, by the way.
Anyway, I'm
because
just looking
incidentally,
for.
the town looked into that.
Is there, you know, what you're saying, I mean, what I'm hearing is that we participate in the array at the Waste Management District, and that is having an effect, and it would be a lot more if we weren't. But it still might be possible at some point to have a bigger offset that would include this residual $233,000. If we had another array, or if we bought into another array.
Sustainability
Right, I mean, what you're
coordinators.
talking about is investing into an array,
Yeah.
right, which has a cost, you know, and then you recoup over time, maybe.
I mean, we could certainly, we could certainly take a look at, does the town have any additional appetite for net metering credits? I recall the calibration was set at what we felt was the maximum safe amount.
Yeah.
But we could take a second look at that.
Okay, well, as I say, it's a relatively minor point. And now the heating fuel also $143,000. I mean, there would be some incentive to have maybe a different type of heating system. Prices go up and down, you don't know if it's gonna stay up, may be difficult to project too accurately into the future, but it just seemed to me another opportunity to look at, is there some kind of program we should be engaging in that would help save some money there too? Those are my thoughts.
That's maybe I would suggest that maybe you might want to put a pin in that thought, Franz, because that's one thing that you could direct us to do instead of reducing rates, is take some of that funding and put it towards potentially reducing expenses by investing in things like this. But that would mean that it would limit our ability to come back with an ordinance next time to adjust the rates.
Okay, yeah. I don't think I want to go that far on it. I mean,
Okay.
it's more suppositional than that. But it would, you also have to have like some really smart person in, I don't know, the finance department to figure out whether it would be worth the investment.
Really a lot, not necessarily just finance, but in sustainability as well. So.
Right, yeah. So if there's a way to pursue that a little bit, I'd be interested in having a conversation. That's the extent of my.
I think a good place to start might be, we had Efficiency Vermont come in and do a process audit at the wastewater treatment plant. Maybe 3 or 4 years ago? Do you recall when that was? Was that longer? I don't know, maybe the
4 or
years are.
5 years ago, yeah,
6 years ago, maybe?
maybe.
Okay.
I think I recall they were quite complimentary of your operations.
Yes, and there are some areas to improve. I mean, that's one of the things we're gonna talk about in the capital with the biosolids study is we're not currently running our cogen system. We're flaring off our gas, so, you know, there's some significant improvements that need to be made to that system to run it, but that's an area where we could generate some power on site.
So shall we move on to the FY24 capital discussion? Yes?
Yeah.
I'm not sure who.
That's me. So there's a big spreadsheet that goes out. There's, I think, 10 years on the first page. There's a second page that has some additional years on it. We've been working off of this sheet, I think this, since 2020, FY20. And I guess I'll kind of just run through the layout of the sheet and where these numbers come from. So there's the existing budget, the FY23 budget in the first column. The second column is the proposed carry forward. So that's projects that have previously been on this capital plan that we have either not got to, or in a lot of cases, they are projects that we're budgeting for that will happen someday. The Hinsdale Bridge, so that's, we're responsible for the betterment of our utilities under the new section of road, so they're raising the grade of the road. So they're gonna raise our infrastructure up with that. And it's gonna increase in size and capacity. We're responsible for the betterment portion of that. That work is taking place now. New Hampshire oversees the work. They'll bill Vermont for it. Someday Vermont will bill us for it. So it'll be some time, but that one will come off the list probably before we're back here next year to talk about it again. Starting at the top, the DPW site evaluation, we had money both in the general fund and the utility fund to start investigating alternatives for upgrading the DPW facility. We produced a study with the half of the money out of the general fund to look at alternative locations. That project is kind of stalled. This is money to continue. That's something we'd like to get back to sooner than later. Hinsdale Bridge, we talked about. The water treatment upgrade is the Pleasant Valley facility project. When we started the process, there was some money set aside for planning and initial funding. That got rolled into the SRF funding through planning loans and now construction loans. This balance, we've kind of just kept there in case something comes up that's not fundable in the project. And we are also need to furnish that building and kind of finish it, not finish it, but furnish it when it's done. So we're not sure what those costs will be at this point. And they're not covered by the funding, so that would be on us. So we likely won't use all that money, but we've kept it there just in case. Water mains, before we went to this specific structure of having specific projects, there was just a category for water mains that we addressed problems with that fell outside of general maintenance. So that's kind of just left over from the old account. Water tank resurfacing is the 3 million gallon tank at the Pleasant Valley Reservoir. The tank, concrete tank, the budgeted amount of money is for cleaning, relining, kind of just, it was built in the late 80s, kind of just bringing it up to new again. So we continue to get a lot of life out of that tank. And that project's kind of been held up by the water treatment facility upgrade, just with site restrictions, really, more than anything. And there's some logistical issues that have arose since we've looked at it further that we'll talk about in the new projects. The mud dam and the Stickney Brook diversion dam, those are two dams that are part of the raw water system that we just need to clean the sediment out of. Again, some of these are just kind of a backlog that from the treatment facility project and site restrictions, and kind of just resources. The project has kind of taken a lot of resources, and we laid these out. I think Franz mentioned earlier, you know, there's a project, there's engineering one year and a project the next year, and probably a little ambitious. So we're kind of trying to hone in on what that schedule looks like. Going down through the list, the Black Mountain generator, the waterfront capacity improvement, and the Signal Hill, those are all part of that phase 1 water improvement project. So we have the application here for you tonight, and hopefully we'll get that one rolling soon. Ames Brook, another generator upgrade. Putney Road, there's a series of Putney Road projects, and those are money that has been set aside for the future upgrade of Putney Road. That'll be a similar situation to the Hinsdale Bridge, where we're responsible for the utility upgrades out there. Retreat Pump Station, we awarded the bid earlier tonight for that one, so hopefully we'll get working on that soon. The Old Guilford Road manhole project, we put out the bid twice and haven't had any takers, so we'll keep working on that one. That's it for carry forward.
I'm afraid I don't understand the carry forward concept very well. Is that money that is already put aside and is waiting to be spent? Or that's not something that's gonna show up in an additional budget allocation or something?
There are some additional budget allocations that we're gonna talk about for the same projects where we were shy on
Yeah.
funding, but yeah, those are already set
So,
aside.
but that's money in the bank.
Correct,
Thank you.
correct. So FY '24 projects, that's the next column. Water meters is, an annual allocation for a continued upgrade of our water meters. Each year, we upgrade so many of them. There's about 3,500 meters, 3,900 meters. Just so they don't all fail at the same time. We just continue to upgrade them as we go. The secondary tank installation, the $405,000, so that, we've started looking closer at the engineering for the tank resurfacing, which we saw in the carryover, and discovered that it's really difficult to take our tank offline. In a typical circumstance, they take the tank offline, they put temporary tanks up for the project so that you could resurface that larger tank. When the engineers started looking at it, we depend on the water in that tank to backwash our filters, and the elevation's really crucial to have the pressure for that backwash. So the temporary solution was more temporary tanks than anyone has available, and a lot of site work, and it was gonna work out to like $2 million just for the just for the temporary water, which was never taken into account when we got the price for the resurfacing. Resurfacing was strictly like, you give us an empty tank and we fix it. So we started looking at options, and for about $810,000, we can build a tank next to the existing tank that would have sufficient quantity for backup, and it would be permanent and provide us resiliency in the future. And that's one of the projects that we submitted to the priority list for the SRF funding. So we hope that, you know, they may come back with a 50% subsidy, maybe better, for that project as well. So there's 405,000 in the FY '24, and if you look at the spreadsheet, there's another 405 in FY '25 for that project as well. The mud dam repairs we talked about, the initial piece was the engineering, this is the project. The Phase 1 water system improvements, that's the bond that got voted on at RTM. They gave us the 50% subsidy. Prices have changed drastically since these estimates were put on this list, and you really don't firm up your estimates until you get pretty deep into engineering. So even with the subsidy, we're about $270,000 short on that project, so this makes up the difference for that project. Putney Road, talked about that one. Lead service line inventory, the EPA changed the lead and copper rule for water systems, and by the fall of '24, they're requiring that we do an inventory of all our water services, so all 3,900 services, to evaluate whether we have any lead services. We're pretty certain we don't have any lead services, but any galvanized steel services that we can't prove were ever downstream of a lead service counts as a lead service, and those will have to be upgraded, regardless of whether they're a private service or a municipal service. So the $75,000, the Drinking Water SRF Fund is offering a loan, which is one of the applications later on tonight. There's a max of $450,000 that you can apply for your lead service inventory. The first $100,000 is forgiven, and then 50% after that. We put $75,000 in because we've talked about it with the engineers, and we feel like we have really good records of our services, and because of the hydraulic evaluation that they recently did, we gleaned a lot of information from that. And we can utilize some of our own people. So we're thinking that the $75,000 will make up the difference. You know, if we were to spend the full $450,000, our portion would be $175,000. We'd know that by the time we come back here next year, so we could adjust if we have to.
So, is that actually measuring, looking for the presence of lead at the tap level in every faucet in town? I mean, I don't quite get what the scope of that is.
Yeah, so that's one of the ways you could do it, through water testing. You know, in some places, if we don't know what a service is, depending on where it is, it might be easier and cheaper just to dig down and look at it and see. But it's every service, and then we have to provide a document to them that shows we've done it. So there's a fair amount of engineering involved in it.
When you say every service,
Every spot that the main is tapped.
so, but that's still like outside my house.
Correct.
You're not talking about looking inside my house.
Outside
As
your
whether
house.
there's lead. I mean, there could still be lead in the pipes that go from where your system leaves off and where my drinking water comes from. We're not talking about looking for that.
In our system, your system starts at the main. So we own the mains, everything from the main to the house is the customers, but this is looking at that line from the main to the house. Nothing inside, nothing
Okay,
interior.
got it.
Good question.
Retreat pump station next, that's the project we awarded tonight. This just makes up the difference again. That came in higher than estimated for that project. The tightening of the sewer mains is an annual, just kind of keeping out infiltration. Putney Road upgrades, and then the biosolids study. So I talked about that briefly. The cost of sludge disposal has gone up drastically in the last several years at the wastewater treatment plant. A couple years ago, we piloted a sludge dryer, which allowed us to reduce the weight of that material drastically. A lot of what we're paying for is trucking. And it worked. It wasn't the right machine for us. It wasn't sized appropriately for our plant. But the technology was encouraging, and given the cost of sludge removal, we think that's probably something we should look at for the future. Dry it, reduce the trucking costs, and maybe treat it to a point where we could land apply it ourselves and not have to pay someone to truck it. That's gonna look at the whole biosolid treatment process as a whole, so we'll look into that cogen system a little bit as well and see what it might take to improve that and get that system running again. So this is just an initial kind of overview, and then there would be recommendations from the engineer that we'd come back with in the future to hopefully, and that may be a project too that we can apply for funding as well. And then down at the bottom of the sheet, we get into the fleet vehicles. So this year, we just have 2 pickup trucks that are due for replacement. And as you go out, it's more of the same. The water projects were updated in this year, based on the hydraulics evaluation that Dufresne Group is finishing up. The sewer projects remain what they have been.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Dan, for the thorough presentation. Board members, are there questions on the FY24 capital for the utility fund budget? I have one very quick, for the biosolid study and the kind of idea about drying the sludge more. Is our system and the way it's set up with the trucking, is that kind of the norm for wastewater plants of our size? Or are we kind of behind the ball on this?
I think at one point there was a thought that we may be able to produce a Class A solid that we could do something with. Our plant has never done that.
Yeah.
And it's pretty common that the sludge gets trucked to a facility, they further treat it, blend it with other material, and then apply it somewhere. So it's not uncommon.
Okay.
It's just getting harder and harder for them to find places to bring it, and fuel cost as well.
Oh, so they're maybe driving it further, and that's, yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm just thinking back, so when you say like a land use application, we're talking about like
Spreading it for
fertilizer.
fertilizer.
Right, and reusing that, and do we think that that's probably the direction we should be looking?
There's kind of a balance there, because to get to that point, there's a lot more, there's a lot of regulation on that, right?
Right.
So it may balance out that we still have someone else take care of that piece of it, but we've reduced the weight of it such that the trucking costs are lower, and they don't have to do as much treatment to it themselves. You know, I guess we'll have to decide whether we want to take on the additional lab work.
Right, okay.
The
So-
finding of places to
Yeah.
put it, like this year you could have plenty of farmers that want it, and then next year they decide they don't, then what do we do with it?
Right.
Kind of thing. So, I mean, the beauty of trucking it away is the truck's gonna come and take it away every week.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Board members? Liz?
Will that study, is there a place in New England that, you have an admixture to the solids and makes it inert and it becomes a different product?
That's essentially what they're doing with it. Ours goes to a facility in New Hampshire. They treat it further, they blend it with wood ash and different things and make fertilizers with it, and a lot of times it gets trucked back to Vermont and applied.
Thank you.
So they make various different products with it.
Yep. Any other board members? Okay, so I just saw Frick's hand.
Frick Sprite. I want to endorse the idea of replacing the galvanized pipes. There's an additional benefit to that, which I know of personally, and that is they leak. And we pay a lot to process our water and deliver it. And I would imagine, I don't know if you've taken a wild guess of how many of those pipes are leaking how many gallons, but I know I replaced one of mine after the leak got so bad it was coming into the building. And when we took the pipe out, it was a sieve.
Yeah. Is the and the steel galvanized pipe is, or the galvanized steel pipe is needs to be replaced if it was downstream of a lead pipe because it essentially absorbs the.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
But our system, a lot of our system dates back to the early 1900s, so it's gonna be hard to prove that there was never a lead service upstream.
Yeah. Yeah. Any other hands on the capital? I don't see any. So we'll move on to the utility fund cash reconciliation. Back to Patrick.
Back to me, sir. Thank you. If you put page 92 of the packet in front of you, you'll be looking at the utility fund cash reconciliation. I want to remind everybody, I do a really awkward job of explaining full accrual accounting each year when we talk about this. I'm not an accountant, but the point that's important to keep in mind is full accrual accounting is different than the type of accounting in the general fund. Full accrual accounting will include depreciation as an expense, but of course depreciation is a non-cash expense. It'll include loan subsidies as a revenue, but those are in fact non-cash revenues. It will include interest in an operating budget, but not the principal payment on a capital project. Those are all a consequence of, I believe, generally accepted accounting principles for full accrual accounting. But the reason that we go through this process, the cash reconciliation, is so that we can provide the board with an eye towards what is our unallocated cash balance in the utility fund, because it's this balance we want to try and maintain, and it's this balance that's going to actually lead into the discussion of the utility rates, which we were pointing out a little earlier. So we start about midway down the page, and there are three columns. I'll maybe also start there. The column on the left is the most recent completed fiscal year, which is fiscal 22. These are audited. We have fiscal 23 in the center and the projected budget for fiscal 24 on the right-hand side. Midway down the page, we start to take a look at cash outlays that are not included in the budget but came out of the fund. So, debt principal at about 1.4 million. Capital cash allocation, we spent 5.3 million in fiscal 22. This is a combination of things that Dan spoke to you about a couple of years ago, and some other water treatment facility upgrade expenses, etc. Minus the bond proceeds that we received during this period of time, which is about $3 million. The net of which is about 3.6 million. Now, we take the operating result of the utility fund, which, as you can see for fiscal 22, was a $3.1 million surplus. We back out the loan subsidies because while those were acknowledged in the operating budget, that was not actually cash that came into the fund. We add back in depreciation because while that's included as an expense within the operating budget, it's not actually a cash outlay for the fund. And then we include the cash outlays that we noted above. Just below that, we see the unallocated cash balance. We started fiscal year 22 with about $5.7 million in cash in the utility fund. We take the impact from the cash reconciliation of the minus 943, and we also account for accrual basis to cash adjustments. This is some more complicated accounting practices that includes things like adjusting our pension liabilities. And then we find that the ending balance of the capital fund was 6.2 million. Again, these are audited, so we have real strong confidence about these numbers. Of that 6.2 million, speaking to Dr. Reichman's point, there's a capital carryover of 2.3 million, meaning now we're all the way down at the bottom of the column. There is $3.9 million in unallocated cash at the end of fiscal 22, and it's this bottom line number of the unallocated cash on hand that's going to lead to the discussion of the utility rates. So the 2.3 million is funds already committed to one capital project or another that are still underway and still pending. The funds are sitting there waiting to be spent. So it's the 3.9 million represents cash that doesn't have a particular purpose it is assigned for. We can see when we look at fiscal 23, which is the middle column, we have back up about midway up the process. I'm not going to walk you through each of those steps the way I did with the fiscal 22, but you can see the net result we're anticipating is that the utility fund will rise to 8.5 million. But there is a significant increase in the capital carryover of about 3.7 million, meaning that the unallocated cash on hand is anticipated growing from the end of fiscal 22 at 3.9 million up to 4.8 million at the end of this year. But that'll be proven out when the audit's complete, and we'll be able to fine tune that. This brings to question, well, how much cash should we be holding on to in the utility fund? What is the proper and appropriate amount that is protecting of the assets and protecting of the system and protecting of the utility users without being overly taxing to the ratepayers? And so staff spent a good deal of time contemplating this issue. We've sort of reached out to some other municipalities to kind of see what their general practice is. We've sought guidance from the League of Cities, and we've sought guidance from a variety of places. There really is no one answer to that. But I can tell you where staff collectively landed. That we should maintain 3 months operating cash for our operations. That's about $1.6 million. And in addition to that, we should carry $2 million with the idea of having adequate cash on hand for 2 significant emergencies occurring simultaneously within the system. And this may seem conservative. It might be conservative. But I think there's an obligation that each of us has, both the board and the staff, in managing a public water supply. This is the water supply that keeps thousands of people alive. And that there is a town of Brattleboro here is in part a consequence of the fact that there is a effective and safe public water system available to support this community. So there's a certain amount of, maybe we should be holding a little bit more, maybe we should be holding a little bit more. But that collectively, that 3.6 number is sort of what we see as the minimum amount of cash that the board should keep on hand to cover in case of emergencies, and also, frankly, when different economic circumstances arise globally that affect us. You heard tonight earlier a number of instances from Dan Tyler where a project that we initially had estimated at this is now up to here. So those types of things are going to happen, and having cash on hand reduces the need to borrow for those types of things, which is another cost-effective way of managing a system. I can go straight into the rates if you'd like. Yeah, why don't I do that? So within.
Let me just pause you 1 minute.
Yes,
It was 1 million per catastrophic disaster to our water system. Two
Two
those,
instances of 1
that,
million,
and then
plus the
1.6 for 3 months of operating. Great.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yep.
Go ahead.
So, as the board will recall, rates, utility rates are codified into Brattleboro Code of Ordinance, and they're done so in 5-year increments. We are 3 years through, or almost 3 years through our current 5-year ordinance. There are 2 more years remaining. That seems fortuitous, but I know based on some recent things that have happened to the fund, debt that's been forgiven, better than anticipated financing on the water treatment facility, hey, maybe we don't need to maintain the rates as we had initially proposed in the rate ordinance 3 years ago. And so staff took a good long look at this with an eye towards, well, let's at least be able to maintain that 3.6 million. And can we do that? There's 3 different scenarios shown in the memo on page 86. You can see maintaining the current 6% on water and 1% on wastewater. And what we forecast at this moment in time is that in fiscal '24, essentially, the unallocated cash would drop to about 4.5 million, and at the end of next year, it would drop to about 4.2 million, each of which is in excess of the 3.6. So if the board was inclined to adjust rates, staff would be happy to assist. We took a look at what if we dropped the water rate increase from 6 down to 3% in each of the next 2 years. We see that the unallocated cash balance at the end of '24 would projected to be about 4.4 million, and then at the end of '25 would be projected to be at about 4 million. So those are each in excess of the 3.6. Could we go a little further? Finally, we look at option 3 and we say, what if we just keyed both the water and the wastewater for the next 2 years at 1%? And for fiscal '24, that drops us down to 4.3 million. At the end of fiscal '25, that takes us to 3.8 million. So we're starting to really get in the ballpark, let's say, of that 3.6 million. I think I'll stop there. I think, yeah, I'll stop there. I'm getting the nod.
Great.
Stop.
Thank you very much, Patrick. So, man, that discussion of the utility fund cash reconciliation is always.
So exciting.
Yeah. He did pretty well. No, I do. And I actually remember my very first year really struggling with it. And this year I find myself like a little more capable of following along. Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah. So questions on both the cash reconciliation section that we discussed, which is like the bottom portion of 97, but then also consideration of, the 3 options that were presented to the board on potential rate changes. We also can discuss other options and get that information back to us for the 20th. But I think what's really important for tonight is to give town staff an idea if we actually are interested in lowering the rates at all. Because if we're not interested in lowering them at all, we're just keeping where it is, that's one thing. If we're gonna change it at all, that will require additional work to bring back to us for the 20th. So I'd kind of like to focus our conversation there, considering we're gonna look at this whole thing again on the 20th, the whole budget. So Liz had her hand up first.
Well, I suggest that we go with option 3. I think it lowers the rate of increase while remaining prudent. And I think in these days, if we can offer the water users a little savings, we should.
Daniel, thumbs up the
I
option
agree with
3.
everything that Elizabeth said, and I really hope that there's at least one other person who does.
Franz or Peter wish to speak on the?
I wish I could really wrap my hands around this level of finance is a little daunting to me. I'd rather go back, talk about drying sludge again. But, you know, I mean, as far as I could see, 3 seems to be a good path.
Franz, any?
Well, just with regard to Peter's sludge concerns, there's recent research I've been reading that there's a lot of carcinogens going into sludge and that might soon be excluded from use as fertilizer in this country. So, don't go down that road too quickly.
I just said I wanted to
How
talk
about
about
option
it.
on the rate?
Yeah,
Option on the
let's-
rate. I think it's very difficult to advocate anything other than option 3. I mean, on what grounds? We hear that provides an adequate cushion, maybe even more than adequate. So why should we shoot for a number higher than 3.6 million? I think we should just go ahead and lower the rate, or lower the rate of increase.
Yeah, I echo all my board members' points. I think let's see it come back on the 20th with that as the change. And I just want to commend town staff on more generally, like I think I find myself often seeing we are pretty conservative and in our budgeting, and that's really important and good because we want to be protecting our systems and our people. And sometimes I do find myself wondering, it's the taxpayer or the ratepayer who sort of is paying for that conservative estimates if we're way over. And I just really commend this type of analysis that's, look, we're doing a good job. What's the right amount here? And really thinking about that in the 2 disasters plus 3 months operating, like I can really get my hands around that, and I really appreciate that work. And we're going to be able to affect a change that will impact people in our community by lowering the rates in the next 2 years. And that's big, and that comes from that work that came from town staff. So thank you very much for doing that. I really appreciate it.
And in our general fund, we have a target of 10%.
Yes.
For the fund balance that we don't spend.
Yeah.
And this, we're looking at 25%. I mean, it's actually quite a significant cushion.
Yeah. And for the reasons how important it is to have it.
Yeah, I'm not saying it's wrong.
Is there any other, is that clear enough guidance for? Yes. Okay. Good.
Yep.
Thank you. Okay, well, so there's no motion necessary for this item. And I think in that case, I'm just going to thank you all very much for the thorough presentation, and we'll see you back on the 20th for the second round on this and a potential adoption of the budget.
Except for the next item on the agenda.
No, I know, I'm just sort of, yeah.
Let me ask just that, since this involves a change in the statute, we're gonna just have a first reading in the ordinance, right?
Yep.
It's gonna be a first reading on the 20th, and then we'll actually act on it after that.
But we'll ask you to act on the budget to approve that next time, so that we have that in place for July 1st.
So it's kind of staggered.
Yeah.
I see your point, though. Yeah. So there. Yeah. So the issue could be we'd have the first reading of the ordinance change on the 20th. We approve the budget with that ordinance change in mind, but theoretically the board could vote against the ordinance change in July. What would be the repercussion for it? The budget would essentially just be.
I think the budget would be in place and we'd be operating under that, and the cash balance would be affected if you didn't approve the second reading.
I think
Okay, I'm fine with that.
And I think if we were doing it the other way and we were raising the rates and we approved that budget and we had to do an ordinance change and we didn't approve that ordinance, I would feel more concerned. But considering we're doing the opposite, I feel more comfortable with it personally. Okay?
Yep, that's fine.
Great. In that case, if there's nothing else, we'll move on to agenda item 8E, which is to authorize applications to the bond bank.
And Dan and Pete will continue on with this
Dan,
item.
Pete, welcome back.
three applications
Hey,
here.
Kim?
I'm gonna head this one.
The first application is the Phase 1 water improvements voted on RTM. This is the application for the funding. Needs to be signed by select board members and the town manager. Second application is an amendment to the current loan that's in place for the water treatment facility upgrade. It's an additional $2 million. The amount that the loan was based on was based on the engineer's estimate. So this $2 million takes into account the actual bid price, and we amended the contract with Dufresne Group back in the beginning for additional engineering services. So that takes into account those changes, which brings the total project amount up to $14.5 million. But with the forgiveness that we've received, it puts it down below 8.5 for the actual amount due on the loan. And that only requires John's signature. And the third application is for the lead line inventory that we discussed previously.
Yep.
So that's the first $100,000 forgiven, and then for 50% after that, up to a total of $450,000. So that requires town manager, finance director, my signature, and select board chair, I believe.
Great. Let's take a motion. Franz?
I move that we approve and sign 3 drinking water state revolving loan fund applications for Phase 1 water system improvement, water treatment facility addition funding, and a lead service line inventory.
Franz has made a motion. Let's have some discussion. Board, questions, comments?
I'm excited to sign the appropriate document.
Yeah, I appreciated the breakdown on who signed which ones. I don't think we've had that before, so. Other comments besides that? No, I'll look to the community if there's anybody. Daniel?
How about this comment to the agenda setting committee? Would this not have been appropriate to just put it in the little red folder and have people sign at the end?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of why.
Just kind of, you know, like, there are a couple of things on tonight's agenda that, no disrespect to the people that presented them, but, you know, maybe would have been ways for us to shorten. Right.
I totally
consent
accept
agenda.
that comment.
I also accept that comment.
Thank you.
Yep. What's that? Oh, okay. Any members of the community wish to speak? I don't see any. In that case, Franz has made a motion to approve and sign 3 drinking water state revolving loan fund loan applications for Phase 1 water system improvement, water treatment facility, additional funding, and a lead service line inventory. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. It's going to carry 5-0. Thank you very much. And so we're going to move on to agenda item 8F, which is the preliminary parking fund presentation, broken into 3 subparts: FY24 budget, FY24 capital, and the parking
Dan?
fund cash reconciliation. Thank you, Pete and Dan, so much for the presentation.
Assistant Town Manager Patrick Moreland and Finance Director Kim Frost are here to step us through a preliminary parking fund budget for fiscal '24. They'll be seeking your thoughts and feedback for us to prepare a final budget for your consideration at the next meeting.
Excellent. Welcome both.
Thank you. So I'm going to ask Kim to walk you through the budget in just a moment. But I'd like to set forth a little context. I'm confident that the board and the public will recall the pandemic was not kind to the parking fund. In fact, at one point in time in 2020, our revenues dropped to absolutely zero, even as expenses continued. Thankfully, the pandemic looks to be largely behind us now, maybe not altogether, but largely behind us. And the parking fund has been made whole by an action of the board last year for the losses it incurred during that period of time. But beyond the losses that hit the books, a number of other things changed. The value of, for example, commercial real estate in town changed. And one of the things we saw is first Dottie's and then Experience Goods left. the parking fund had been reliant upon lease income to balance itself out. And we're not altogether sure that's the right idea for how to manage a parking fund. The parking fund and the parking operations are not unlike the utility fund, an interdisciplinary team of people working on these things. There's parking enforcement, that's one element or aspect of parking. There's managing the fund, which is a sort of a finance operation. And then there's the infrastructure that supports the fund, all the parking meters, all the parking kiosks, the parking lots, et cetera. There's been a lot of shift in responsibility in how those different assets are overseen and managed in the last couple of years, in addition to the change in the commercial real estate market. And there's what I would describe as quite a bit of excitement within staff to tackle the parking system as a project, to try and find a way to further improve the sort of customer user experience, and at the same time explore options for perhaps less infrastructure. What if we got rid of meters? What if we got rid of kiosks, et cetera? How would we manage the system, and might we be able to manage the system at less cost with less infrastructure? But those investigations are occurring right now. We weren't able to get those done in time to inform the fiscal '24 budget, but we'd like to think we could get those investigations completed maybe by the end of summer. And so one of the things we'd like to do is, once we have a sense as to what those recommendations would be for how to manage the system, we would then take a second look at how to calibrate parking rates in order to balance out the system and have that system be self-sustaining without being reliant upon rental income to balance it all out. Then, if we get some rental income, great. But the system needn't be altogether dependent upon that income to balance the system and to balance out the fund. So what we're showing you with the proposed fiscal '24 parking budget is sort of a continuation of what happened last year, which I know nobody was particularly pleased with. It's a deficit budget. But what we would hope to do would be to come back to you at the end of summer, maybe with a whole broad range of different recommendations. And maybe at that point in time, you might see the wisdom in adjusting the budget mid-year. With that, I'd turn it over to Kim, and she can talk about the budget as it is presently constructed.
Question, you referred to this interdisciplinary group that manages the system.
Yep.
Is there one person who's like in charge?
John Potter.
John Potter is? Okay, here you go.
Stops there. Wait. Oh, no, that's your responsibility.
How long were you sitting on that?
Months.
That was an
7
amazing.
days, yeah.
Wow, great.
Just yesterday, I think.
I'll take you 10
I
bucks.
see Kim check her watch.
Yeah.
After you.
Nope. Okay,
Yeah.
so I'll just run you through the budget that's in your packets. So as Patrick said, we're looking at a deficit budget this year for fiscal '24 of $293,463.
Wait, Kim,
Page 103.
thank you.
Okay. So so as far as revenues, we have total revenues of $650,500. Really, the only change there is that we did budget for some rental space revenue at the transportation center. The construction company that's doing work next door is renting some of the space for their office area. So we did include some of that revenue. That won't be long-term. So we did do a short stint for that revenue. As far as expenses, our expenses are up about 5% from budget '23 at $943,963. I'll go through a couple of the major things that happened. We have the transfer out, as Patrick explained to you, in the utility fund. I took a look at that, and we included different expenses in there. So it went up in the utility fund to pay back to the general fund, and it's also going up here a bit, about 9% of about $4,255. You'll see that we have a decrease of $29.60 in utility fund interest, as Patrick explained in the utility fund. They had the parking fund had borrowed money from the utility fund. That has now been paid back, so there'll be no interest in fiscal '24. Depreciation, there was a modest decrease of about 2%, about $5,600. And the biggest swings here in the expenses are the staff salaries. We did include in this budget a full-time custodian just for the transportation center. Recently, we felt that the community had been reporting that the transportation center was not as clean as it used to be. This is partially due, right, to short staffing, vacation coverage at the facility department, and an increase in undesirable behavior that's happening at the transportation center. So the staff's hopes are that if we add a full-time custodian here, that's there, you know, on a full-time basis, that will positively impact the transportation center along with the other decisions that this board has made. So that is referenced in the staff salaries, which is up about $46,398, up about 26.8%. We put that in at $38,000 for the new custodian. If you direct us to take that out, that will go down when we come back in a couple of weeks. And then the other expenses are due to adding staff. So, you know, we have an increase in benefits, Social Security, and all of that. So that is the budget. If anybody has any questions.
Yeah, absolutely. Liz's hand went up first.
So Patrick referred to kind of a team effort similar to utilities fund where salaries are apportioned. And is that the same going on here with these staff salaries? Or are there, other than the maintenance person, are there people specifically assigned to the transportation center?
So yes, the parking department is down there, and there's a supervisor, there's 2 parking enforcement officers, and then there's a custodian that kind of spends half their time at the transportation center and then half their time elsewhere. So that would be 4. And then this new custodian would make it 5.
Thank you.
Other board members? Daniel.
Thanks. Sorry, I was desperately searching on our woefully inadequate website for some information.
It's not
okay.
a select board meeting unless we kick on the website
Yeah,
at least
I mean,
once.
I'm sorry, you know, I was looking for previous parking budgets because I'd like to see kind of actuals going back a little bit further than just this. You know, it's like in the general fund budget, what do we look at, like 5 years?
Yeah.
I think, you know,
I think
and I'm
it's
sure I
4
made
years.
this same comment last year. And it's not to bash anyone over the head, it's just like, we know that the parking fund has had kind of a funky few years. And I was kind of wanting to look back at like the actual revenue history over, you know, from pre-pandemic times, really.
Okay.
Because, you know, like I said earlier today, like, I would like to take a real close look at parking revenue by location. I'm like 100% serious about that. And, you know, just so you know, because I'd like to kind of like understand what's happening. You know, like what we're looking at here is a figure for the entire system. And I guess like my read of looking at that is that generally speaking, parking as a driver of revenue in Brattleboro might have changed kind of like in certain areas, but as a whole, hasn't changed that much in the last couple of years. We don't expect it to. Is that a reasonable statement to make?
I mean, in the last couple of years, right?
Yeah.
So during the pandemic.
Right, which is why
saw
I'd
a
sort of
very
like to
bit-
s-
Right, so
yeah.
you'd probably want to see, I guess, 19.
2019, yeah.
Right, 19, 20 and 21 were,
Yeah.
totally hit by the pandemic. And
Yeah.
that's why you see in 22 where we replaced some lost revenue with the ARPA money
Yeah.
in 22, right?
Yeah.
So,
And, so I guess also like for next year, like, unless there's a good reason, could we have these over like a 5-year time span, just to kind of get a little
Yeah.
better sense of the history?
and our new finance package could probably do that in a beautiful way.
I bet it
To
could.
show you
With
with
like a little
graphs
ribbon
and
on it.
trends and
Yeah.
pie charts.
Yeah.
No, but yes, seriously,
Well
yes, we
played.
could do that. That's not a problem.
Great, thanks.
Yeah, we have the data.
So Daniel, if I could ask just about your concern here.
It's more of a
I mean,
curiosity.
I
than concern.
find it interesting what you're proposing, but I don't see, is there some aspect of the decision-making process that depends on that other material? I'm just trying to fully understand what you're looking for.
Decision-making process around the parking budget?
Yeah, around the parking
No.
budget or around the future of the parking system.
Yeah,
How
I
are you
mean-
gonna use that information?
So what I would like to do is better understand the parking trends in locations over town, right? So my assumption would be in the last, I don't know, ever since I've been involved in Brattleboro politics, people have, had a really negative feeling about the transportation center. And so what I would expect to see in the data is that there used to be a certain amount of revenue collected and it's gone down, or maybe it's even plummeted. John and I spoke about this briefly, and he reminded me about the pandemic change, and I guess, weirdly, I forgot about that. And so it rebounded, right? But what I would expect to see, based on what I hear from folks, is that the rebound at the parking garage is slower than in other places, right? There's also, there's other things at play, it costs different rates in different places, right? So you lose parking, you lose people parking in the parking garage, so they go and park in the Harmony lot, which actually is more expensive. Or they park on the street, which is more expensive, So overall in the system, it's kind of flat. But I would be curious to learn what the trends have been in locations, because I'm a curious person.
Okay, but not because you have some plan for the system that would depend on that information.
I just feel like if we know that this system is made up of some main lots, right? It's 4 that are probably the big ones, and then on-street, and so when we did a parking study a long time ago now, and I think what the conclusion
5 or
was
6 years ago?
that everything was fine.
It feels pretty recent to me, but
Yeah,
you were
I would
probably-
think maybe 4 years ago.
No, it wasn't when we were on the
Oh,
board.
yes,
No,
it was.
Anyway,
I'm a
point
fan of
is,
this.
I just want to understand the system a little better, and I think having that kind of data would be useful.
Okay.
And then maybe once we see that stuff, we'll be like, oh, and it'll inform something, or maybe it won't.
Okay, that's good. I just want to know more about what you were thinking of.
Yeah. But, specifically back to the garage, I want to see some change in that number that's positive
At some point in the future.
within 6 months.
Yeah.
Do you have any other questions?
Well, I just wonder if Daniel wants to hear about the parking study we did in 1990 before
No.
building
Boy,
the
I don't
parking
know if
garage.
that is
No.
Good.
Maybe
I didn't
after
mean
the
now.
meeting.
Maybe over a few beers.
Other questions, Franz, or I've got just one. Okay, so am I understanding that, did you have?
Well, I have a comment, not a question, just that what Patrick was talking about in terms of really thinking what the alternatives or possibilities are for the parking system over the next few months sounds really good to me. Assuming staff has time to actually work on that as well as everything else that we're looking at. But I'm definitely interested in where does this system go over the next few years?
Daniel?
I just want to come back to something Patrick said. Get rid of meters? You're serious?
maybe.
Okay, so
We're not sold on that
That's-
concept yet.
yeah.
But I know it's an idea that, some parking system management systems have accomplished. Could we accomplish it here? What would be the drawbacks? What would be the consequences of that? Would we end up with a system that we'd all be happy with and proud of? Or would it be, fundamentally flawed? We're not sure yet, but we've got some meetings set up to talk to some people and, yeah.
Okay, I just want to say that like some people still don't have like a card that they're going to use or a device they're going to use like quarters. And I want to accommodate those people as well.
Liz?
I just have questions about the ceiling of the garage that was proposed. And, there were leaks and they were going to be sealed. And I think maybe you did a floor, but I thought that we budgeted for more. Well, yeah, so what's happening with that is my question, because that gets to the fundamental question of the usefulness of the structure and in particularly the rentability of the commercial space.
So, if I can speak to that, the plot thickens. The board set aside some funds years ago, a couple of years ago. And we did some really good work on the floor immediately above the lease space and addressed the seams between the floating concrete slabs in a way that was really productive, but not entirely eliminating of water infiltration into the lease space. Since that time, I think it was last year at this time, the board approved an additional sum of money to do the same process on the top floor. The idea being, let's stop the water before it gets into the building rather than just before it gets into the lease space. And our general idea is let's be doing a floor a year. And so there's going to be, that money hasn't been spent. I believe it's planned to be spent in July. I think they're coming to do that work in July. We were unable to get them at the end of last year. That's gonna happen this year, moving forward a little bit, little by little. Have sent Steve Horton and friends into the leased space and found in experience good that we weren't so much dealing with water infiltrating from above so much as what we were dealing with was an uninsulated concrete ceiling that would take conditioned air that had a higher humidity level to it and then force it to rain down within the facility. So the project to address that has not been fully scoped out or identified yet. We currently have the Engelberth Construction leasing that space. The reason they liked that space as opposed to the Dottie space was because that space was dry and felt secure to them, whereas they felt it would rain or something more like it in the Dottie space. Haven't yet had someone take a look at that, but I know Engelberth was there and they started to take a look at it. And so, we need to take a deeper dive into what's going on in that space, because I think that may in fact be something coming in from above rather than just, a poorly designed space.
So the gaps in the seal that you did the first year, do you think that was real or masked by the fact that you had this rain situation on the ceiling?
I think it's absolutely real, but I think, you can have more than one problem occurring simultaneously.
Don't we know it? But.
And that facility is a classic example.
Yeah. Is there a solution to that, a stopgap to complete?
What
the
I can say
remedy?
is we don't exactly know yet. We know there's more research that we need to do. We believe the problem in experienced goods is less complicated than, it's differently complicated than we thought. We thought previously it was about water getting into the space. Instead, it's about condensation. So
So
work needs to be done.
just to continue the conversation here, we still need to get through capital and the parking fund cash reconciliation discussion. So I just want to.
I'm finished, thank you.
Okay, excellent. Other questions on specifically the FY24 budget for the parking fund? We've got two hands. I have one very brief one. Basically, so you guys are going to do some work on this and then want to come back to the select board, like in this fiscal year, to propose some modifications to this budget. Did I understand Patrick correctly?
That's correct. It's in the works.
Okay, because like I would like to look at considering like revenue from the meters and whether we should increase the rates, and like should we increase the rates to try to cover at least the amount that we're spending on the additional staff salary, or even looking at could we increase the rates to at least attempt to affect the loss of revenue coming from the no rentals. So these are discussions I'd like to have. Am I hearing from town staff that like that there's work being done or work to be done soon, that that would be a more productive conversation to do in a couple months?
Yes. Like by, we were thinking hopefully by the end of the summer.
Okay. The only other question I had was when it comes to borrowing, so we just finished paying the interest off on borrowing from the utility fund. What was that borrowing for originally? Do you know?
That was for all of the infrastructure.
So in that case, I
So
have
all the meters and
So-
kiosks, et cetera.
Yeah, so I'm curious, have we ever thought about maybe doing another borrow from the utility fund with the idea of paying interest off, just like we just finished, now that we've finished, to do like a real, basically rework of the rental spaces and the parking structure, and then use the additional income that we get on the rentals with that work done to pay the interest to the utility fund? I understand that that if we had that idea and we really considered it, we'd probably want to look back at what we just did with the rates. And I know that because maybe that would impact like whether we want to borrow from the utility fund. But I'm just curious, is that the type of thing that we could do, or is there some reason why that we really shouldn't consider that? Because I'm thinking like a real investment of money into the parking structure. We're thinking about this in a lot of different angles. And one of them, to me, really feels like investing into the facility itself and trying to improve it. And this seems like a really interesting way to do it through these two funds. And I didn't really understand that you could borrow from each other like that. And now that we've paid off the last borrowing, is that something to consider?
Sure.
And I know I just throw a big thing in there when you talk about it. I know we've got public
Yeah.
comment
Not
on it,
germane.
but
Yeah.
I think
Sure.
it is germane.
Well,
I think it absolutely is
Not to
germane.
the FY24 budget.
It would impact the FY20.
Well, I'm saying is, I think it's a really good thing for them to think about, but we don't need to go into details
We don't need to go into
now.
detail, agreed.
I just
If you wanna
have
keep it
a
very brief.
comment that I think that's a good idea because we just keep operating at this loss.
Yeah.
It's not sustainable, and we have what some may consider, a town asset that is not really being properly utilized. I think we spent most of this meeting talking about, the parking garage and its utility and the rental space and its utility. And we have to do something because we just can't keep borrowing. And if we need to borrow more to make it up to Hoyle, then we should.
Okay, yeah. Let's hear from the members of the community, and then we can move on to the next part of this budget item.
Approving a deficit budget is really, and an enterprise fund is really unbelievable. Enterprise funds make money for the municipality, and we're running a parking fund that's running $300,000 deficit, and we're going to approve it without, well, maybe you're going to talk about it in a few minutes, about rate changes. I lost the battle 5 years ago when we put in new meters. I was full head-on pay and display all over town. I think the town loses money with meters, and they're unsightly, and we have so many heads that don't have meters on them. So I think that's a great conversation to have. A quick question. Is this going to be 2 full-time FTE custodians in this budget?
Yes.
And we're only getting to utilize 1.5 FTEs in this budget, correct?
That's correct.
And so, I mean, from the general fund side, that's a great deal for the taxpayers. But the reality is, that's where the general fund should be paying for this, because you're running a deficit, and that half-time custodian should be pushed over into the general fund. And so the deficit is increased by carrying something that the general fund should be happening, which is roughly, with benefits, maybe $20,000, $25,000. When I went back and looked at the your meeting that you approved, when you approved your finances by consent agenda, I looked at the revenue stream. And the revenue stream is way off. And all your line items, yet in this budget here, they're the same as last year. And I think that's wrong. I think that these revenue line items need to be adjusted downward, because that's where the trend is going this year. Never mind going back 5 years. Actually, you should have, in this budget here, budget to actual, because it almost gives you 10 months of information that you can look at that is more reflective of the actual. So when I see all the same line items for revenue, I think the deficit is going to be much more than the $290,000+ that you have here. And I strongly encourage you to do a rate increase in our parking.
Thank you, Dick. Surprisingly, don't have anyone on Zoom. Just dwindles down. Frick?
We're operating on Atlantic time, right? Anyway, first of all, the parking downtown, at least on Main Street and thereabouts, is so competitive that I definitely urge you to keep the meters or some facsimile there, absolutely. I learned this as we were renovating Amy's, and I did my best in 21, 22 to fund the parking budget with many of those lovely little donation envelopes that Franz has there. But I guess we weren't successful enough. On the issue of the parking garage, Liz, thanks for asking the question I was going to ask. Patrick, if you would indulge me, the issue of moisture in conditioned spaces area where I have a lot of expertise, and I would be happy to offer some suggestions. Spray foam.
That's what I've.
Yeah, anyway. So,
Thank you, Frick.
yeah, well, as far as the parking garage commercial space goes, the environment around it is also relevant. Of course, we all know that, but yeah, figuring out how to deal with it is the fun part.
Thank you, Frick. All right, so we'll move on to the FY24 capital for fund budget, for the parking fund budget. Is that
So,
Kim
yep.
as well? Great.
Yep, so in a routine maintenance at the transportation center, our fire alarm system did not pass inspection. So that is out to bid. Staff is getting the bids on that. It is over 10 years old, so it is expected. We will bring back the actual costs to that in June 20th, on the next meeting. So that's the capital, that's it.
Excellent, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any questions on the capital? I think we can just roll right into the parking fund cash reconciliation, Kim, as well. Yep.
So I'm just gonna really go through the numbers, because Patrick did a lot of explaining on the accounting of how full accrual accounting works. So we'll go all the way to actual 2022, which is the column to the left, because that's our audited numbers We start with the debt principal. The cash outlay is not included in the budget, is the debt principal of $140,000. Then you come down to the cash reconciliation. You take your operating surplus or deficit, which in that year was a surplus from the ARPA money. We deal with our depreciation. We take out our cash outlays, which is $140,000, and the impact on the parking fund cash balance is $553,529. Our beginning balance from the year prior was $90,757. Our impact was the $553, and the accrual to cash-based adjustments, which is those small little adjustments that are made to, you know, our retirement and things of that nature through the accrual to the cash basis of $13,000, which gives us an ending cash balance in fiscal year 2022 of $657,287. That is an audited number. That's a good number. And looking at budget 23 to, you know, we're looking at, you know, it's not audited yet. We don't have those last minute entries, but we are looking at a balance of about $515,000 for the end of this year. But we, again, you know, once we get the audit, we'll have more clear numbers for you there.
And so the projection for the FY '24, no, that's,
The last,
Number,
that
yeah.
would be budget 2024, but
Yep.
yeah, is 448,000. But I mean, that's really far to project here.
yeah.
Because so, you know, we still have to finish here, get our actuals, get audited, make our adjustments. That's gonna impact then our beginning balance of the previous year, so I feel like it'll be close, I'm sure, but.
To the 448.
Yeah, I'm sure it'll be close.
So even, you know, running a deficit, if we were to approve this budget, that would be
Yeah.
a deficit of 293,463 for the proposed, that the actual impact to the ending balance would be, you know, with this sort of estimate, it's like a little bit less than $100,000.
Yeah, we have cash in the bank here.
Yeah.
We might be running at a deficit in the budgeted year because of our projections, but there is cash
Depreciation.
here in the bank.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Depreciation.
Right,
It's included as an
depreciation
expense, but it's a
is in-
non-cash expense. So it
Exactly.
doesn't really have
Exactly.
the same impact to the cash balance.
Yeah.
And if you take depreciation out of our budget, we're really only running a $26,000 deficit.
Yeah.
And that's a big difference.
Yeah,
So-
that makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, board, questions or comments on this last item? And then just basically generally direction for town staff on bringing this back on the 20th for additional consideration and possible approval. Liz?
I would like to look towards, you know, making this budget whole. And whether that's raising the
Yeah.
rates or what,
What do you mean, make it whole?
self-sustaining.
You mean make an adjustment to these, specific adjustment to the numbers in front of
No,
us?
make an adjustment to the parking rates and, you know, rentals system as a whole, so that we're no longer continuing operating at a deficit.
And the deficit, I mean, we've got this actual cash deficit of $26,000 as compared to,
Well, that's a budget deficit
That-
for 23.
yeah.
When we
So I'm
add
just
back,
wondering
it's
which-
15,000, I just did.
What would we be actually shooting for? Would it be to zero out this $293,463?
Which includes the deficit,
The depreciation, which is what we do in the cash reconciliation. We do add the depreciation back.
Yeah, and but is that something we need to worry about at this point in terms of parking rates? I mean, I'm in favor of not running deficits. I also remember from past years when there was concern on a lot of merchants in town that if we increase the parking, people are gonna go over to Walmart and stuff like that. So I wouldn't like to increase parking rates, but I would be open to it if it really was the right thing to do. But this whole accounting system leaves me somewhat mystified, and I don't know how important it is to zero out which number on the page. That's what I'm getting at.
Yeah, you go.
So, as far as the parking rates go, we're not gonna have those back before this board will have to approve this budget. So we wouldn't bring those rates back to you until we do our analysis and look at different options, bring you those options so you could look at that, which will hopefully be in like August or September. Something that you could think about with this budget, it's still gonna be in a deficit, but because of the way that accrual counting works, and we have to use depreciation as an expense here, but it is not a cash item, you could take that out of the budget, like, let's just, right, we could take that dollar amount out, and you will be running at a $15,000 deficit.
And is that a responsible way to approach the question of parking rates?
Well, I think that this budget, eventually you're gonna look at the rates and hopefully make it self-sustaining. It should be a self-sustaining fund, right? I mean, I think that when you look at it as a whole, it was very impacted by COVID. It is starting to come back. You're seeing revenues come back, but is it coming back to full capacity? And we haven't had any rental income, which that was over $100,000 in past budgets in your revenue.
Yeah.
That, you don't see here because like Daniel had mentioned, that was, years ago, but that was a very big source of revenue that is no longer here. So, I mean, I think that we need a budget, so I think it's prudent to okay this budget. If this is something that you want to do is including the extra custodian, that would be something that you could direct us not to put in here for right now, if that makes you uncomfortable, because then we take out that expense. And then adding back depreciation, that would basically put us into a positive budget. In essence, right? Because
Yeah.
depreciation's there. I mean, we're talking in.
So I just want to remind the board about the custodian discussion that happened. Like, I'm trying to remember if it was before this board or during
Was
this
that the
board.
end of the
Last
budget
board.
cycle, I think?
So, yeah, and it was basically just a discussion of like, how can we work to better the transportation center? And one of the things was about cleanliness, and that really, there was like not a lot of staffing happening at the cleaning for the transportation center. And so it kind of came, thanks in part to discussion from Dick about where this money actually should be coming from, that it really should come up talking about the parking fund. So that's where it's now coming. I still support it. I really do think that, we can put, security personnel there, but like the cleanliness and just the general feel of that place is really an important part of trying to make it achieve one of our goals of making that a place that people can park and it's a good spot in town. And then I'm really in support of really considering some kind of loan to the for myself personally. But I just for consideration for the board, if you guys want to pull it from the budget, that's also something we do. Specific the additional staff member.
No, I think we need the staff member. I just, there's a short term that we have this budget that has to be approved. But in the longer term,
Yes.
that we need a plan going forward to have, a sustainable parking garage and a plan for this as a land use, that the garage functions properly and that we have rental capacity and rental income from things. And we've talked about solutions at both sides. but it is somewhat separate from the question of, will we approve this budget?
Yeah.
It's a planning for maintaining and operating the structure that we're not there yet because it's not functioning properly. It's not giving us the benefit that we want.
And that's gonna take some time, right? I mean, we gotta do the analysis on the rates and decide, decide what the rates are gonna be, and if that's gonna be self-sustaining, and can you make it self-sustaining on rates? And have the rental be gravy?
Yeah.
Like, there's many different, options, but we need that information so you can make decisions.
And we couldn't just put off approving this budget until then?
No,
Okay.
no, I would
No,
not recommend that.
but we can come back and adjust it.
Yes,
no,
that,
I'm understanding
that's
that.
totally, yep.
Is there any way that we could just have the general fund pay the parking fund for the half of the staff member it uses, which would probably be like 20 grand or
I
something?
mean, I could do that in the transfer, were you just gonna say something?
I was gonna say something. I think that doesn't account for the supervisor's time at the transportation center, right? So, I don't wanna name names, but the facilities maintenance supervisor, in addition to, so there's one current staff that spends part-time at the transportation center and part-time at the library, all right? So that's like 0.5 and 0.5 FTEs. But then you've also got the supervisor who spends time both at the library, at the municipal center, at the police department, at the rec and parks, at the transportation center. So when you add that person's portion of time, it sort of accounts for the other half of the custodian in a way that is really, really close.
Okay.
So,
Well, all right. Okay, well, we can hear from the public, and we're gonna look at this budget a second time. I mean, I kind of feel a little, like I would like to be, I think I've talked enough about this. Is there anyone else on the board who wants to speak before we go to the public? Okay, so is there anyone from the public who wishes to speak? Yeah, quick question.
My memory's sketchy, so I used to know all this stuff. But as we were talking, this fund usually makes money for the general fund. And, what we charge for services, even if they're outrageous, it's money that goes into the general fund. The transfer to the general fund used to be $90,000. And now it is zeroed out this year
No.
and next year.
That was to pay back a loan.
That was
That was to pay back a
the
one-time loan
the loan
from
the-
COVID.
Okay.
Yeah,
And the transfer out is for what?
that is paying for pieces of general fund, like town manager office, expenses that hit all funds within the town, HR, things of that nature.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, so not seeing any other hands in the room or on Zoom. Thank you so much, Kim, for the presentation and answering all the questions. Really appreciate it. So we'll see this again on the 20th for possible approval, and then also we'll obviously be clearly discussing this again at the end of the summer. So, cool. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to move on to agenda item 8G, which is to announce committee vacancies. So because I am the chair of the board, I will read them.
Oh, thank you.
You are welcome. So we have 4 vacancies on the Agricultural Advisory Board. We have 5 vacancies on the ADA Advisory Board, 3 on the Arts Committee, 1 on the Brattleboro Housing Partnership Board of Commissioners, 2 on the Cemetery Committee, 3 on the CPCC Citizens Police Communications Committee, 3 on the Conservation Commission, 1 on the Design Review Committee as the alternate, 3 on the Developmental Review Board. Wow, that's a lot on that one this time. 3 on the DRB as an alternate, 3 on the Energy Committee, 3 for fence viewers, 3 honor roll, 2 for the Planning Commission, 3 for the Rec and Park Board, 1 or 2 for the Senior Solutions Advisory Council, 1 for the Traffic Safety Committee, 2 for the Tree Advisory Committee, and 1 or 2 for our Ware of Coal. And if someone were interested in applying for any of these committees, what would they do?
They would reach out to Jessica Stickler at the town manager's office.
Excellent. And I would just take a note that just in the last couple of months, this board has seen work done, like good work done by some of these committees and brought to the select board, and we've acted on them and we've made real changes. You know, cemetery committee was just a couple weeks ago. Tree advisory committee came with changes to the ordinances, and then also we just had a discussion about something done by the traffic safety committee. So these committees do real work. They help the town, they help the select board, and so we really appreciate the people who are on them, and we really encourage people to apply for the vacancies that I just read through. So, Peter.
So, on these committee, if they don't get filled, we read them again?
Yeah,
So-
yes, we
Yes.
do, yes.
So I would just recommend to the agenda setting committee that we read them at such time that people are still listening and attentive. So perhaps at the beginning of the meeting, they could be read. Just my only suggestion. 'Cause
No,
There's
it's a good thought.
Does,
7 people listening.
I just had a thought that our communications staff person could announce these.
Communication coordinator?
Yeah.
Maybe they could even go on a podcast.
Ooh.
Ooh,
Yeah, okay. Got it.
only if you read them.
Yes.
You just get me there, just read them and I leave. That'd be great. Don't even introduce me. I just like the guy who reads them.
I would like the motion.
Yes.
Yes, to adjourn.
Peter has made a motion to adjourn. All those in favor? Aye. It's gonna carry 5-0. Thank you so much to our
Just need some-
interpreters. Thank you very much to BCTV. Thank you, Patrick, so much for running the computer.
Give me that
John.
folder.